Yes.
The Leaf Spring Army sends its regards.
Hello, everyone. I'm the Enforcer, and I'm accompanied by Enforcer Matt.
And good evening, folks. It's Enforcer Matt, and welcome back to day 1313 of the War News stream. And we have very big news tonight. We have seen that Ukraine slammed Belgorod with a drone strike and also a missile attack as well. Also, several drones have violated NATO airspace yet again today in several different NATO countries. And also, China is finalizing its Taiwan invasion plans in the midst of all this other chaos. So we got big news tonight. And also, it is the Sunday night fundraiser stream, and it's good to see you all once again.
And of course, we're going to be covering the past 24 hours of news from around the world, as we have been able to hear significant developments from the entirety of Europe and the Middle East, as well as East Asia, of major events and incidents unfolding today. As we have heard on the front lines of Ukraine, and particularly within the Belgorod and Bryansk regions of the Russian Federation, that the Ukrainian armed forces have started to turn the table as far as infrastructure strikes are concerned. The Ukrainian armed forces have conducted a debilitating strike against the Belgorod Oblast's main power plant, knocking off the power grid of Belgorod instantly and plunging the entire city into a city-wide and sub-oblast-wide blackout. At the same time, from what we have been able to gather today, a Ukrainian HIMARS firing GMLRS rockets has been able to land successful hits around the city of Karachev within the Bryansk Oblast, also hitting another vital facility within that area. At the same time as the Ukrainians were using, from what we understand, American-made missiles to conduct strikes inside the Bryansk Oblast of the Russian Federation, the United States of America is making a rare and unprecedented move, as the Vice President of the United States of America did confirm today that the U.S. is seriously considering the provisions of Tomahawk cruise missiles to the state of Ukraine to use in deep strikes against the Russian Federation and its critical infrastructure throughout the entirety of the European area of the Russian Federation. This is unprecedented, and it's something that we've never heard of before, and it does appear that the Ukrainians are more than happy to try and finalize that deal, or a subset of that deal, as a part of their $90 billion arms deal that will be announced in the coming days in full detail and what exactly it will include. While all of this has been going on in Europe, in East Asia, some concerning news has started to emerge as multiple sources close to the government have started to state that there is concerning intelligence coming forward from satellite photography showing that the People's Republic of China and the People's Liberation Army Navy is hurriedly converting civilian ferries into military ferries, which most ferries inside of the People's Republic of China generally are made as dual-purpose ferries and with minimal modification can be used for military purposes. From what we understand, the U.S. military and their intelligence has gathered that the People's Republic of China is already hurriedly working on converting a large amount of these civilian ferries into military transports, which could be used to further augment China's sea lift capabilities on an invasion of Taiwan. For this reason, it appears that the People's Republic of China is hurriedly racing to try and get as close as possible to invasion ready within the shortest possible period of time, pushing the invasion window at this point all the way into around late 2026 at the earliest and on up until 2032 at the latest. And on top of that, we have also been able to hear that the Islamic Republic of Iran has decided to retaliate against the greater world after the United Nations conducted their snapback sanctions against the Islamic Republic of Iran, with the Islamic Republic of Iran now stating today that this is a fine time for them to start working on their quote-unquote nuclear industries, since they have no real reasons, at least economically, to continue to even try and deceive everyone on the fact that they're trying to still work on creating and fielding a usable nuclear weapon. At the same time, we have been able to hear that Iran is attempting to skirt these sanctions through some pretty convoluted schemes, at least in terms of maritime trade, and we have also been able to hear that the Iranians are trying to face off the Pakistani-Saudi defense pact by asking if they can join, acting like they do not know that that defense pact is directly aimed at them. On top of that, the Yemeni Houthis have conducted another attack on the state of Israel, while news is coming out from Jerusalem and Tel Aviv that the Israelis seem hell-bent on conducting another round of strikes against the Islamic Republic of Iran, considering it's been made quite clear at the moment that the Islamic Republic of Iran is still working on nuclear weaponry and also longer-range missile systems that will already can reach Israel, but also will be able to reach the entirety of the United States here within the very near future. The Ukrainian armed forces have held their lines today, while drones have been sighted across the whole of Europe, ranging all the way from the central areas of northern Norway and all the way down into Bucharest within Romania. We have a massive amount of news to cover from just the past 24 hours alone, and these are some of the biggest topics of the night, but we have an insanely large amount of topics ranging from quite literally every single piece of news from every corner of the world over the course of the day. And I also have to point out that tonight is the Sunday fundraiser night, which is for Razum for Ukraine, which is an amazing nonprofit that has been helping out in Ukraine for years so far, and we've continued to support with fundraisers for an incredibly long period of time. We have already hit about $500 out of our $2,500 goal in that fundraiser, and we'll hopefully see that the Leaf Spring Army hits that fundraiser goal like they have every single night of the war so far, every single Sunday when we've run these fundraisers. So, with that in mind, it is time for us to get on into the major news of the night, starting with our largest stories first, and then working our way on down into the smaller stories through the course of the night. Moving us on immediately into the area of Russia, we have been able to see that the armed forces of Ukraine have started to turn the tables significantly against the Russian Federation as the winter is near approaching. Many will know that the Russian Federation has conducted a significant anti-infrastructure campaign against the state of Ukraine since the beginning of the war. The Russian Federation has used Shahed 136s and ballistic and cruise missiles to attempt to target and knock out key power plants throughout the state of Ukraine to try and plunge the nation into a state of cold and darkness during the winter months, which could result in a great deal of casualties due to people dying from exposure. This is a fairly significant issue, and not only that, has had a limited effect on the Ukrainian war industry throughout the conflict, considering that all industry these days primarily run off of electric tools or electric machinery, which has to be connected to a larger power grid. The state of Ukraine has refrained from conducting any major attacks against Russian power plants over the larger part of the war until today, and it appears that they're now going to be changing their tactics moving forward to where the Russian Federation will not be the only one conducting attacks on critical infrastructure inside of an enemy state state, the armed forces of Ukraine will also be conducting their own attacks against critical Russian infrastructure near to the area of the Ukrainian border. And that moves us directly into the city of Belgorod. We were able to see that the Ukrainians quickly removed the Russians from an ability to have electricity, at least within the larger part of the city. Allow me to show you all what it looks like when the Ukrainians decided to turn off the lights for the Russians, literally. Oh. Well, it's dark out.
Wow. Instant off. Clap on, clap off. And they clapped it right off, I guess you could say.
Man, I'd have to say, I think they did clap it right off. Notice the lack of lights. How that happened. A little bit interesting with that. Also, look at this little thing that happened over the horizon right here. It's almost like it was an electrical explosion over there in the distance. A little bit wild with that. Also, it's even more wild. You can actually see the power plant peeking over those commie blocks right there in the background, or at least the main smokestacks of the power plant right back there in the center frame of that video. And look at that. There they are. And there they go. They're gone. It's just completely pitch black out. I gotta say, folks, that the Ukrainians are probably some of the most environmentally conscious people when it comes to making sure that the Russians will be able to see the nighttime sky unabated. We all know that light pollution is a big issue in a lot of developed countries. And even in undeveloped countries like the Russian Federation, many citizens have never seen the true night sky unabated because of the light pollution from below. Now the citizens of Belgrade will be able to appreciate, kind of like how the Russians have been forcing some Ukrainians to appreciate the unfettered night sky in all of its glory with no light pollution whatsoever. In the daytime, the Ukrainians continued their attacks against these power plants and continued to hit them even farther, ensuring that any repairs would take months on end to get this power plant back to an operational level. Here are some of the strikes that we saw during the daytime on that very same power plant.
Разъебывают, пидорас!
Oh my god.
Пизда, Бурыч, смотри. Охуеть! Куда мы попали? Вот это аттракцион, блядь!
And a second one.
Нас остановили!
And it seems like they're getting a laugh out of it, but I don't think they're realizing. I don't think they're realizing they're about to be cold.
Why are they laughing? Why are they laughing at their own power plant getting hit? Like, I don't understand the Russians. Like, they don't make any sense.
Man, these guys are literally sitting here going, look at our power plant, we're gonna freeze. Like, it's like, bro, that's not something to laugh at. It's like, it's about to be winter. It's like, you really need one of these. It's a little important. But it looks like their power plant is going to be out for a while. On top of that, we also got to see that earlier on during the night, there were some air defense failures, which were one of the main reasons why the Ukrainians were able to land successful hits on the power plant. There goes the air defense missile. Onwards to glory, they say. Here comes the boom. Any second now. It doesn't seem to hit anything. It seems like it just landed in another part of the city down there on the ground and exploded. I want y'all to note that really quick. If it had hit something, we would have seen an explosion somewhere, maybe even over the horizon, but the explosion would have persisted for at least a couple of seconds. This was an instantaneous flash, which is only the missile detonating. You could see it right there. It's literally like a little snapshot from a camera. Right there. So apparently it just flew into some building or some tree or something on the other side of the city and just hit it and exploded instantly without hitting anything. So that may have been one of the reasons why the other Ukrainian drone was able to make it to the power plant, slam right into it, and then knock out the entire power grid for the city, and also a decent amount of the Belgorod Oblast as well in the surrounding area. But do not worry, folks. The Belgorod governor was able to whip out some spotlights and turn on the emergency generators, at least at the governor's palace for the Belgorod Oblast, to make it look like there is some electricity, and also made a statement to everyone that don't worry, it's all fine. The Ukrainians did just blow up our power plant for about half the oblast, but we'll be okay, because the Russians were just invincible like that and built different.
Дорогие друзья, враг нанес удар по инфраструктуре. Сейчас оцениваем ущерб. Есть перебои с подачей электроэнергии, достаточно значительные.
Also, you know something that just hit me, Matthew? I was just thinking about this.
What is it?
How in the world is anyone listening to this message, considering if the power's out, most of the mobile data and Wi-Fi centers most likely went out without with the power. So how in the world is anyone even listening to this message that this guy made?
I would assume that the Russians probably have emergency generators on their cellular towers, kind of like we do. I would imagine they probably have the same thing. So they probably still have a connection through their cellular if they have it working like ours.
Possibly, maybe. But thinking about that, though, it would be a little bit odd for the Russians to build in a redundancy like that. Usually in Magic Russia land, everything's just expected to work fine and there is no backup at all. They're currently looking into the consequences. They don't know what did this. They have to conduct a full-scale investigation.
Для того, чтобы, первое, подключить, где есть возможности, необходимость резервной генерации, и там, где возможно переподключить для обеспечения нужд населения и наших предприятий. Сейчас обзвонил наши...
You know what really stands out about this gentleman right here? And I'm just watching him. I was just sitting here thinking, this guy really has a way with words. Could you imagine this being your governor? Like, this guy right here seems like he's basically dead inside. Like, he has no energy. He has nothing. He's literally zero energy, as they say. Like, this guy is literally, like, acting like he has nothing going on. Like, he is depressed as hell.
Man, this guy's running on fumes, like the Russian power grid and their gas stations. Ah! Oh, man. Dude, imagine, though, the governor of Alabama coming out and being like, hello, everyone. The state of Alabama is under attack. We've been working really hard to make sure that our state is maintained up to an operational standard and that our power grid remains on so that we all of y'all can live in a comfortable and safe way. We'll also be trying to set up backup and a lot of people would be like, I don't really know if I voted for this person. Like, if they sounded like that, a lot of people would be very hesitant to vote for them again.
Yeah, they probably didn't vote for this guy. That's the crazy part. Either if they did vote for him, who knows what was happening to actually get him elected in Russia. Who knows?
You know, man, when the power grid went off, this guy immediately lost all of his energy as well.
В водоканале нашу медицину все перешли на резервные источники питания, и там мы понимаем, что работа уже началась. Обязательно проинформирую вас после 21:00 сегодня вечером. Хотел сказать, в связи с тем, что сейчас электроэнергии нет, возможно перебои в оповещении вас.
He's having to explain to the very literate Russians what a blackout is. You see, a blackout is what's called a power outage. You may not have power running to the outlets in your home, and your refrigerator might stop running, if you even have a refrigerator yet. But don't worry, we will especially prioritize the power to your TV unit so that we can see Vladimir Putin's beautiful face talking right in your living room.
You know, Matthew, he's actually admitting right here, I think, that the data tower, well, like the Wi-Fi abilities or the mobile data abilities in the region might be completely out because he said there may be interruptions in alerting you. So apparently there is no way for them to actually alert some of these people because they may not have those backup generators at their towers.
Maybe. It could be. Possibly.
От ракетной или опасности, или атак БПЛА. Поэтому максимально внимательно лучше покинуть территорию, улицы.
He says better to leave. He said it's better to leave the area, actually. We can't really alert you on time, so it's better if you just, like, pack your shit up and just head out. Like, that's probably better.
Населенных пунктов и находиться дома. Я попрошу вас с пониманием отнестись к этой просьбе. Еще раз всем добрый вечер. Обязательно сегодня еще раз выйду на связь. Спасибо.
I'll definitely get in touch again. That sounded sarcastic, honestly, but it does appear the Belgorod Oblast didn't have the greatest of days today. The Ukrainians have caused a bit of an issue there, at least with knocking out that key power plant that's right inside the city. But if you thought that was the only issue that Ukrainians caused today, they caused another significant issue in Oblast about one up from there. Just next to Belgorod, north of the Kursk Oblast, is the Bryansk Oblast, another frontier oblast of the Russian Federation directly along the Ukrainian border. And in the Oblast of Bryansk is a city called Karachev. And at Karachev, there is a Grau arsenal, which is no longer there. This one got blown up a little while ago. And there's also some larger industrial concerns, like the Karachevsky Zavad Elektrodetl, which is this factory right here. This one's an important one, because the Ukrainians blew it up today on this eastern end of the city of Karachev. Karachev is not a looker. Like, if I dropped y'all down in the streets, y'all will be able to see what the average Russian town looks like, and it really doesn't look like that much. Some people have this idea that Russia's like 500 years ahead of us. The truth is that they're 500 years behind us. But nevertheless, this one factory is one of the things that keeps them kind of close to being in the modern day to a degree, as it is responsible for producing a great deal of important necessities for the Russian military, at least in terms of computational abilities and others. And it appears that it got blown up today by the Ukrainians, of all people. Look at that. The electrodettle plant located in the town of Karachev in the Bryansk Oblast in western Russia had a fire break out of the facility. The plant specializes in the production of electronic equipment. Just recently, the components manufactured at the electrodettle were said to be found in the wreckage of a Russian Iskander-K cruise missile that was fired at the government building in Kyiv. You can see that the factory is well on fire at this point. And quite clearly, the Russians will be greatly displeased by this development. But one thing that's incredibly interesting about this plant getting blown up is what it was hit by. Allow me to get you all the clips here that let us hear, at least, the sounds of the impacts of what was hitting this factory inside of this area of the Bryansk Oblast. Listen to this clip, and then I'll tell you all what it is.
Вы чё, ёбнулись нахуй?
Oh, there's a ghoul in this picture. Oh, he keeps appearing at random.
Did y'all hear that right there? Did you hear that in that part of the clip, Matty, where like it was a sound like a whooshing sound, and it was getting higher pitch and then kind of getting a little bit faint the higher pitch it was getting? Did you hear that right there?
Yeah, a little bit, yeah.
Yeah, let's listen to that a little bit more. We actually have this clip and another one, and then I'll tell you all what this was. There it is again. Now let's move on into our second clip really quickly, which is this one right here. And let me try and show y'all this again. Here you go. Here are the fires. And if you sat there and listened to the audio in that clip, it was a little bit interesting. It didn't sound like a drone. Drones that usually are launched by the Ukrainians have a propeller whirring sound, a high-pitched lawnmower sort of a noise is what we call it, and that generally lets us know that it's a drone-based attack. This one did not have that noise. It was an incredibly loud whooshing sound, and then it was followed by an explosion, a very strong thud within the area. That actually tells us, folks, that for the first time in about a year, the Ukrainian forces have actually conducted an attack on Russian soil with GMLRS missiles that were fired by a HIMARS, which is the M240 multiple launch rocket system. And let me see if I can show y'all the M240 HIMARS right here. The M142, actually, sorry. The M240 is actually the Mars, but this is the vehicle that did conduct the attack, and that missile, the GMLRS right there, is the one that actually hit this factory. And this is actually quite significant, folks, because the current president of the United States rescinded the permission of the Ukrainians to use GMLRS missiles against Russian forces or Russian targets inside of Russia when he came into office of January of this year. Now that the Ukrainians have conducted an attack on Karachev today in the Bryansk Oblast with GMLRS missiles at a range of about 80 miles, this is actually giving a lot of credence to believe that the President of the United States has given authorization for the state of Ukraine to use American weaponry in long-distance attacks into the Russian Federation. That is a significant development. Generally, the prior presidency, which was the Biden administration, was also quite hesitant on giving out this sort of permission. And that permission was only given out towards the earlier part of 2024, and then it was rescinded with the ascendancy of the new president here in the earlier part of 2025, meaning that the Ukrainians only had the ability to use GMLRS missiles in Russia for about less than a year or so. Now we are seeing that they have apparently been given this ability to strike into Russia again by the current president. And this is also something that is really shocking, because now there's been a statement that came out of the United States today that is telling us that this is really just the tip of the iceberg. According to statements made by the Vice President of the United States on Fox News today, the Vice President stated, "We're looking to sell Tomahawk missiles to Europe for Ukraine. Key shift. Not just giving U.S. weapons, but Europeans buying them, putting skin in the game." That's according to the vice president.
That's huge. That's huge right there, honestly, because we had heard rumors that they were going to try to sell them Tomahawks, but that was sort of like, backdoor rumor type stuff right there. Honestly, with the vice president saying that himself, it sounds like it's going to happen. So that's something there. If you'd have asked most people about 6 months to a year ago if Ukraine was going to get Tomahawks, most people would have said no, because that's something right there that was generally off the table until now. So that's a really good sign. I'm glad to hear that.
I would have to say this is a huge shift, folks. The Tomahawk is not a little missile. This thing is quite significant. Let me go get y'all the Tomahawk missile. Here it is right here. Everybody knows the Tomahawks. The Tomahawks are famous because of their use against the Iraqis in the Gulf War of 1991. We used tons of these against the Iraqis back then, and we've generally been quite fond of these sorts of missiles since then. We use them all the time whenever we can. But nevertheless, one thing that is incredibly interesting about these is that they can carry a nuclear warhead. With a yield of about 5 to 200 kilotons of TNT, which is the W-80 warhead. It can also carry a conventional warhead of about 1,000 pounds, meaning that this thing actually has quite a significant conventional payload if we're not speaking about its nuclear abilities. And obviously, if we gave any Tomahawks to Ukraine, they're not going to be nuclear armed. This is something that is incredibly interesting, also because of the fact that the Tomahawk cruise missiles have a nice range, at least the Block 2s, of about 1,550 miles. Some of the Block 3s have a range of about 1,000 miles, a 550-mile reduction, and then the Block 3 TLAM-Ds have a range of about 810 miles. And also it goes on to the Block 4 and the Block 5, but all of them hover around generally the 900 to 1,000 mile range. If we were to take this at face value and assume that they are going to give Ukraine a version of the Tomahawk that has about a 1,000 mile range, this means that the Ukrainians will be able to strike a great deal of targets in the Russian Federation. This strike at Karachev was 80 miles deep. Some Ukrainian strikes have reached places like the city of Salavat, which is about 800 miles in the Russian Federation. If they are given a Tomahawk, and they fired off one of these Tomahawk cruise missiles at the Russian border, and they fired it at its maximum distance of about 1,000 miles, they would almost be able to reach the cities of Kandalashka and Murmansk, as well as Arkhangelsk, which are within this area of northern Russia, which is incredibly shocking. As a matter of fact, they actually would be able to put Arkhangelsk, which is a somewhat insignificant city, at least for the Russian northern fleet, under direct threat of a missile attack by the state of Ukraine at that point. And if they were to get the Block 2 version, which has a 1,550 mile range, they would actually be able to strike well over the Ural mountain range and into Asia, hitting cities like Chelyabinsk, Tyumen, Yekaterinburg, and even the city of Omsk with direct attacks by these Ukrainian cruise missiles that would be provided by the United States and paid for by the European Union. That is huge. Massive sorts of developments. And we don't know if they're going to finalize that deal at the moment, but it appears that serious consideration is being given, considering that the Vice President of the United States even mentioned it on a news interview with Fox News earlier today. So this is quite a change, a massive change, as a matter of fact, in terms of foreign policy against the Russians. And I personally have to say that in my 2 cents, I think this is the greatest foreign policy change we've seen so far. It's going from treating the Russians as though they are not a threat at all and don't even exist as an issue, and now treating them as a serious threat, and also giving them the full width of the American firepower available, at least to the Ukrainians, to slam them with. I would have to say, just considering it alone is a massive step forward, considering that we have not seen the current administration consider this, at least up until now, and the prior administration actually shot this down outright. So it actually is showing that we are starting to escalate the situation against the Russians, and now we are conducting bilateral escalation instead of it just being unilateral escalation by the Russians endlessly that we do not respond to in any way. A lot of people have been talking about this sort of a situation, and also the fact that the President of the United States, or more so the Vice President, in that very same interview, also stated that the Russian Federation is not even responding to the United States anymore in our attempts to try and start up peace talks between Russia and Ukraine again. They are quite literally ignoring us, and have been over the past few weeks, and appear to be adamant on continuing the war at all costs without stopping or even reconsidering their position in the conflict right now. This has led a lot of people to start talking about what Putin's general strategy is going to be in the remainder of the war, and what the United States is possibly going to do as a result of that. And Matthew, what are people thinking about that, and what are you thinking about that as well?
All right. So interestingly enough, it's the Russians who are ending all the peace talks to end the Ukraine war. Right now, Putin will not agree to meet with the U.S. President Zelensky, nor will he agree to meet with Zelensky one-on-one by himself, unless Zelensky's willing to go to Moscow, which is obviously never going to happen. So what is Putin doing at this point? What is his new strategy, considering that he's failing on the front lines of Ukraine, he's also failing on the economy, and now he's starting to lash out at NATO. So what is he really trying to do now that this war has gotten to this point? And it looks like 49% said he's planning to attack NATO, that's his plan, while 30% said he's hoping the U.S. will end support for Ukraine, and 15% said he's just throwing a small fit, and he'll be back to trying to calm the United States officials very soon. So I would say it sounds like right now Putin has something else in mind. He appears not to actually want to negotiate anymore. Before we had seen Putin was trying to kowtow the U.S. officials basically into basically prolonging the aid not going to Ukraine. That's what he was trying to do. But now we're seeing that Putin seems to be changing his focus over to NATO by sending these drones into NATO airspace. And right now, NATO is not taking responsibility for those drone attacks, and they're not saying that those are indeed Russian drones. But me personally, I would say that he's actually probably planning to attack NATO. I'm actually with a 49%. I think he's planning on doing something to escalate instead of de-escalate at this point, in the hopes that NATO is going to back down. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to be with the 49% as well. I would believe that the Russians are actually planning on conducting a war with NATO at this point, rather than continuing on with this absolutely stupid game that they were playing for a little while, where they pretended like they were willing to talk about peace, although they clearly weren't. And for some people who may be joining our channel here tonight and hearing about this for the first time, we've been saying for months on end that the Russian Federation had absolutely no intention of ever pursuing a realistic peace with the West on the war in Ukraine, and were just simply towing along U.S. officials and taking advantage of their naivety on that matter, or the belief that they actually had some sort of a personal relation with Putin, and that would sway him to stop an entire conflict that has significant outcomes for the Russian Federation, whether it ends in victory or defeat. This is something that clearly is being shown right now, because they're not even willing to talk to us anymore and pretend like they're willing to pursue a peace. They are now going completely with what they really thought the entire time, is that they will not be going for a peace, and they are just going to continue the war until the country collapses, or until they win completely in Ukraine, one or the other. Now, with that in mind, they cannot win completely in Ukraine, so that means they have to try and find a creative way to end this conflict. And at what creative ways could they come up with to try and end the conflict? And the one way that I could see it, folks, and I'll explain really quickly, because this is generally what I've been saying for months, and I think that this is where the Russians are at right now. Putin is not willing to accept defeat, and at this point he will go to any single length to try and see a victory in Ukraine, even if it means that extremely dangerous gambles have to be made. Let me lay out the picture that we have right now. Russia is bound to collapse within a year and a half economically at this point. There are so many red flags inside of the Russian Federation's economy, it may as well be the Soviet Union. It is incredibly bad off. The agricultural industry is collapsing, the automotive industries are collapsing, the oil industries and gas industries are collapsing, the Russian Federation no longer has an existent tax base, banks are greatly reducing the lines of credit for individual citizens, scared that they're going to rack up debts as a last financial resort that they'll never be able to pay off and take the banks down with them. The situation is terrible. Russia is doomed to collapse, and Putin's grip on power in the country is going to collapse within a year and a half. So, at this point, Russia technically has nothing to lose. And I also want to put this out there just to make sure to shoot these down before people say them. China cannot financially bail out Russia. Russia is in the hole by hundreds of billions of dollars. And if you tried to bail them out, you're going to have to give an upfront lump sum, pretty much infusing it into the Russian economy by hundreds of billions of dollars. Somewhere most likely to the tune of $500 billion or upwards of that. No treasury on the planet is ever going to try and lend or borrow that much money in a singular period and throw it into another country and cause rocketing inflation in their own country and significant economic fallouts because of that massive lending just to try and keep Russia afloat. So there really is nobody in the world that can save the Russians from the economic collapse that's coming. So with that in mind, Russia is doomed to collapse. Putin is left with no options. He's going to end up pretty much going out the door in a year and a half anyways. So if that's the case, then what in the world did they have to lose with starting a war with NATO? Nothing. The government will collapse anyways. Putin's power will end either way. But what there is to gain from a war with NATO is a slim chance at trying to recover the whole situation, at least to some minimal degree. If they started a war with NATO or conducted an attack on NATO that then turned into a war, they would be able to hold over the heads of everyone here in the West the threat of nuclear destruction, which is something that has been incredibly important here in the Western world and the mindset about the war in Ukraine for a long time. Even the President of the United States currently, while running for the election last year in 2024, when brought up time and time again, why in the world are we willing to just meet Russia in the middle and just pretty much give up half of Ukraine to end this war? Because they have nukes and they could kill us all. It's an incredibly important part of what the fear is here in the West of the Russians, is that they will try and force a situation where they could just nuke and try and kill all of us. And the only way they can do that is by getting in a conventional war. If that conventional war begins, if they're winning, they're not going to nuke us. If we defeat them, which is a pretty high likelihood that we would start to defeat them pretty quickly within the opening weeks or months of that war, nuclear war starts to exponentially skyrocket in its possibility. And then at that point, we're all having to sit here in the West and go, okay, are we going to absolutely steamroll the Russians and face nuclear annihilation, or are we going to try and meet them in the middle to avoid nuclear Armageddon in the Northern Hemisphere? That's generally what the Russians are trying to force us into at this point, and that's why I would believe, with the large majority of people who voted on that poll, that Russia actually has a plan to attack NATO. Because at this point, if they're going out either way, at least as far as Putin is concerned, why in the world not try and start a war with NATO and go all in for a Hail Mary and see if it comes out somewhat more positive than the current situation where they collapse anyways and nothing even is working to their benefit at all beyond that. But still,
Yeah, that's true. Also, I still think that Putin would prefer NATO to take the first shot. I think that's probably why they're doing these drone incursions into NATO airspace, is they're looking for some type of legitimate provocation that they can say, okay, look, NATO attacked Russia, therefore Russia's going to do something to NATO and escalate dramatically. I think they're looking for that, and that's probably why they're flying these drones over. And right now, NATO still will not say where these drones are coming from. Today, Zelensky stated that he has intelligence that Russian shadow tanker vessels are launching these drones into NATO territory, but NATO has not commented on that, and generally it's gone and fallen on deaf ears. So, you know, we can pretty much know at this point, folks, what is going on. Russia's literally making major aggressions on NATO, so obviously, in my opinion, the only one you could really point to at this point is Russia launching these drones. So, you know, what is NATO going to do? Are they going to keep stalling? They're going to keep waiting for someone to get hurt by these Russian drones? I don't know what NATO is doing at this point. It seems like Russia has their plans more put together than NATO at this point, and Russia is failing at the war right now. So I'm not sure what's going to happen, but it's certainly interesting.
I would have to say it is certainly interesting, and there's a lot at play at the moment. And generally, while most people in the West, including the United States, aren't really on the same page as to what we're going to do against the Russians, considering that they're just on Putin's page, they're all on board with what exactly they're doing and what the plan is and where it's going to lead to. But a lot of people are also talking about the statements that were made by the vice president today that the U.S. is wanting to sell Tomahawk cruise missiles to the state of Ukraine. And a lot of people have been asked, is that the right move, or do y'all think it's not? And it actually appears that that's a unanimous answer. So, Matthew, what are people thinking about that? And what are you thinking about that as well?
All right, so we did hear that according to the statements we heard, U.S. officials are strongly considering selling Tomahawk missiles to Ukraine very soon, and the question is this the right move? And 83% said yes, Ukraine should get Tomahawks, and that's an overwhelming majority in favor of sending those weapons, while 6% said no, Ukraine should not get Tomahawks, and 5% said it really won't change anything. And I would say this is an excellent foreign policy change. I was not expecting it, and also to hear the statements from the vice president there suggesting that's very likely, I would say that's a very good change, and like I said, unexpected. So I'm with the 83%. Ukraine should get the Tomahawks. That's a long-range weapon that would be very potent to use for Ukraine to hit longer-range targets inside of Russia. So it's a long time coming, and like the enforcer mentioned, previously it was ruled out. Like the last administration, I believe, ruled that out. And now all of a sudden, the new administration, which people thought were going to abandon Ukraine, did a complete 180 and is now going to apparently sell Tomahawks to Ukraine. So it turns out it's actually turning out pretty decent for Ukraine that the new fellow's in charge. So that did a complete 180 right there. Totally blindsiding everybody. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say I'm with the 83%. This is actually a great move. I would say that this is one of the best foreign policy maneuvers that we've seen, at least recently, and it's really starting to put the Russians in the hot seat. The Ukrainians are going to start raining all hell if they get these things, and they're allowed to strike wherever they want inside of Russia. Clearly, the Kremlin and government buildings will most likely be off of the list. Those will not be allowed to be hit as targets, but everything else in the country will be on the menu. And the Ukrainians will be able to hit whatever they want, wherever they want, and also cause an insanely large amount of damage because these missiles have a 1,000-pound payload on board or larger of explosives. So I would have to say that this is an incredibly good move, and I think that the United States should give the Tomahawks to Ukraine, and the Ukrainians should receive them. Also, I do have to put out there that from what we understand, the Tomahawks will be purchased by the Europeans, and then the Europeans will transfer those Tomahawks to the state of Ukraine. They're still ending up being given by the United States, but the Europeans are paying for them and then giving them to the state of Ukraine. So that's currently how we know it's being spoken about, at least at the moment. But I would have to say that this is an incredibly good move. Now, I'm not wanting to make this into a political thing, but I will have to mention, because this is the case, that the prior administration and the Congress were in unison back in the day in completely shooting down the idea of ever giving Ukraine a Tomahawk cruise missile. This was actually brought up a while ago. It was about a year and a half or 2 years ago, and the prior administration, along with most of the Congress, said that that would be absolutely reckless and unnecessary because the Ukrainians could just cause enough damage at least several hundred miles away from their border with their own drones, and giving a Tomahawk cruise missile to the state of Ukraine would be wildly escalatory and dangerous. Considering that we're seeing a situation that's pretty much out of control at the moment, this is putting the Russians in the hot seat now because it is a little bit dangerous and escalatory, but it also puts the Russians in a far worse position than ever before. Because unlike the state of Ukraine, which is only at its widest, if we're speaking about the entire country, about 700 miles across, giving the Russians a limited range of targets to hit, the Ukrainians can literally hit the railway corridors on the Trans-Siberian Railway in Asia now, and also any other critical infrastructure within that area as well. So this is a huge change for the state of Ukraine, and putting the Russians at a severe disadvantage if this was actually approved and then the purchase orders were made. So moving on out of that, we have also been able to hear, breaking from this news for a minute and moving us on over into East Asia for some other significant news, considering we want to make sure to cover the biggest stories first tonight, we are going to be moving over into East Asia and into the People's Republic of China. And starting off with a little bit of a warm-up, we were able to hear that the Chinese have made a claim today about their Shenyang J-35s. They have stated that the radar cross-section of a J-35 is 0.01 meter squared, which means that it has a radar cross-section the size of the palm of an adult person's hand. I don't really know if that is accurate or not. The Chinese have a pretty significant record of fibbing a lot of their abilities and results, and this may be one of them, because we do know that the Chinese have stated, at least in the past, that a lot of their equipment is the latest, the greatest, the finest, and the best, and it really doesn't pan out to always be the case, at least when we see them in action, which is incredibly rare. On top of that, they also state that their doctrine is one of the best on the planet, but every single time we've seen a Chinese mission to the United Nations ever get in a firefight in a place like Central Africa, they end up getting the floor wiped against them by a bunch of pretty much bandits with AKs. So it's a really hard thing for me to believe that this aircraft has a wildly small radar cross-section, also considering that the Chinese military budget is about a quarter of ours, and that they're claiming now that they're producing stealth fighters, the J-20 and now the J-35, along with multiple other new aircraft that they're currently developing right now, on a shoestring budget compared to us, and they're also mass producing them in the hundreds, if not the thousands, in some production orders. That seems to be a bit of a stretch to me, but we'll have to wait and see if the United States ever releases any information when they finally get one of these things on a radar of what its cross-section really did look like and what its capabilities really are. But moving on from that, and out of that minor piece of news of a kind of a Chinese propaganda claim today, we were able to hear that there were some very concerning details that came out today that weren't supposed to get out, but apparently did nonetheless. According to a classified U.S. military intelligence report seen by ABC News, they have stated that, according to the classified report, China is rapidly building up the country's commercial ferry fleet to prepare for an invasion of Taiwan. And this is something that has actually been known for a while. This is an open secret that Chinese civilian ferries are designed as dual-purpose ferries, which can be converted quite easily to be used in military service. But from what we've been able to see and hear, this picture showing one of the large Bailey bridges that the Chinese have conducted that can be floated over to Taiwan and then pretty much operate as a pier for them to roll on and roll off cargo equipment and personnel, we can actually see that, according to this picture, ferries such as civilian types are actually usable and cross-compatible with these Bailey bridges, showing that apparently some military transformation has occurred to these ferries. And we're also hearing, at least in further detail, that they're rapidly building up the commercial ferry fleet to prepare for an invasion of Taiwan, and the vessels have been modified to carry tanks and partake in amphibious operations, which is making it fairly clear that China is racing at the moment to start an invasion of the island of Taiwan, which is something that is a decent likelihood. We already have known over the prior decade that the People's Republic of China, under the new leadership of the premier and chairman of the Central Military Committee, and the Chinese Communist Party, Xi Jinping, has been making it wildly clear that they are going to be reuniting Taiwan, which is the Republic of China, with the People's Republic of China, which is the communist mainland, under any means necessary, whether that be done diplomatically or militarily, at least according to Xi. That's up to the choice of the Taiwanese. And the Taiwanese have made it incredibly clear that they are not willing to rejoin with China under any sorts of circumstances at any point in the near future, pretty much meaning that the Chinese will eventually have to invade them to take the island and bring it under Chinese control. And considering that we're now hearing that they are conducting rapid conversions of civilian ferries for military purpose, it is making it wildly clear that they're trying to get this invasion ready to go as soon as possible. As a matter of fact, folks, I actually think this may lead a little bit of credence to the idea that China is trying to synchronize their invasion of Taiwan with what's going on in Europe. As many of y'all will know, as I've said, with current Chinese production capabilities and shipbuilding outputs, the Chinese would be ready to conduct their invasion of Taiwan by late 2027 at the earliest. And that would mean that Russia would financially have collapsed just about at that point or a little bit earlier, and the war in Europe will have pretty much ended at that point, or everything will have ended in Europe by that time. And that means China would pretty much be on its own to invade Taiwan and then have to deal with the United States in its full might. With them rapidly conducting these civilian to military ferry conversions, they may actually be able to roll back the window to as early as late 2026 for them to try and conduct their naval invasions of the island. And that would also mean that they would be conducting their naval invasions of the island of Taiwan around the same time that the war in Ukraine and possibly a larger war with NATO may be ongoing across the face of Europe, meaning that the Chinese may be able to take advantage of that ongoing conflict and also try and conduct their own invasion of Taiwan, with the US and largely our Western alliance having to split its firepower and resources in two, some of it in Europe and some of it in East Asia. It's a very interesting sort of a development, and it is one that is giving us at least an idea for now that the People's Republic of China is seriously considering trying to take advantage of that time window and to try and conduct that sort of an invasion. On top of that, it does appear that the Chinese are continuing to get a little bit of a sideshow to their sideshow, at least in the Middle East, but we'll be getting to that here in a minute. Before we get on into the rest of the news, though, I do want to ask y'all about this major speech that the Russian Federation has stated that Putin will be conducting, while at the same time the U.S. is going to be conducting a massive meeting with the President of the United States and multiple generals and admirals, pretty much the highest ranked admirals and generals in the U.S. military, all at the Quantico base in Virginia here soon. And Matthew, what are people thinking about that, and what are you thinking about that as well?
All right, so to cover this in its entirety, right now we're getting word that Putin will apparently deliver a major speech this week after the U.S. just got done scheduling a top military leadership meeting in Quantico, Virginia, that I believe is going to take place on Tuesday, so it's right around the corner. So what are your thoughts about that? And it looks like 47% said it seems connected, and that's quite disturbing to hear, and 25% said I need more info on this one, and 18% said it's totally unrelated and no worries whatsoever. So what we know at the moment is we have no details about what type of speech Putin is planning on making this week, but they say it's going to be a major speech, and apparently they're blocking off the airwaves so that way Putin can make the speech across the entire country of Russia, and it'll be broadcast worldwide. So whatever he's going to be saying apparently is important, or at least important to him. So what we know about the top leadership meeting in the U.S. is it's going to take place in Quantico, Virginia, and now we're learning that the U.S. president is set to actually address the top military commanders in addition to the Secretary of War. So we're also not really sure what that's actually about. People are speculating that maybe it's a pep rally for the troops, but other people are speculating it could be something politically related, or it could be something related to war preparations against Russia. But you got to admit, it seems a little bit odd that there's a major speech from Russia and then a top leadership meeting taking place on the exact same week between the U.S. and Russia. Seems a little bit strange. And I'm going to say I'm actually undecided. I'm with the 9%. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say that I would be undecided as well. I would have to be with the 9%. It is an incredibly weird and interesting sort of a development, and I would have to be entirely honest with y'all. I just don't really know what's going to be coming out of either of them. We've heard a million different rumors of what the Quantico meeting is going to be about, and of course we can't confirm any of them. And then we've heard a million rumors about what the Putin speech is going to be next week, and of course we don't even know what that speech is going to be about either. Only time will tell, and we'll have to wait for those speeches and events to happen to be able to get an idea of what they actually were. But still, we will be waiting.
Honestly, man, if that if that meeting in Virginia is some type of pep rally or something, I'm going to tell y'all right now, I'm going to be, as a civilian in America, I'm going to be livid about that. If they get all the top leadership in the world from all military command all together in one spot in Virginia just to have a pep rally, that's going to be unbelievably stupid. Hopefully that's not the case, because it's going to make me really wonder if we have really good people in charge or not at that point, because that will be such a bad miscalculation. Because obviously, no matter how good your security is, if you have all your top guys meeting in one physical location at once, even if you think it's secure, that's still a security risk. That's very dangerous to have that happen. And also, now the president is going to be there too, so that's even adding to the risk as well. So hopefully there's a real good reason for getting all these guys together. It better be a very good reason to warrant something of that nature, at least in my opinion.
I would have to say I would generally agree with Enforcer Matt on that. We have been talking about this a little bit off air, and generally, if this is going to end up becoming some sort of a pep rally or some sort of politicization of the military, I'm just gonna be honest with you. I'm gonna be dogging on the current administration a great deal. Just to put that up front. These officers, if we're dealing with anything important around the world, they can just be given a bit of a memo on what's going on at their command posts where they're needed. Bringing everyone to the United States to have a little pep rally for the cameras or to conduct what some people have described as a possible purge is an absolutely stupid and ridiculous idea if that actually ends up becoming the final notion of what that is, or the final result of what that ends up becoming. That's going to be absolutely stupid. So I would have to say that we'll have to wait and see what's going to happen with that. As far as the speech with Putin, it's probably going to be something stupid. He thinks he's a genius, and every time he comes out on a speech, he has to talk about some stupid shit like Vasily the Wise of Novgorod from the year 900 AD, which really has no impact on anyone anymore, like at all. But he's got to come out and make himself sound like he's like some sort of a eternal knowledged president of Russia, and then he comes off sounding like an absolute idiot. So I have a feeling that's what his speech will end up sounding like, but I don't know what's going to happen at Quantico.
Honestly, I would say, and this is going to sound kind of a little bit weird, but honestly, the best case scenario that we could have out of this meeting is that hopefully the generals are meeting to discuss war plans against Russia. That would be the only legitimate reason I could see getting all those guys together in one physical location, is if they're discussing potentially war plans to go against Russia, because they've learned through intelligence that Putin plans on warring with NATO. If that was the case, I would say, okay, that might be warranted to get them together at that point. That would actually justify the risk of having all those guys together. But we don't know right now. There's so much stuff happening in the background, and we're not being told about it. NATO's keeping everything very quiet about the drone incidents over NATO airspace. They're keeping that very low key, and we're not really hearing much about it in the public, except for some rumored statements here and there. So it could be something as bad as this. It could be that they have intelligence that Putin is about to launch war in NATO, and this is like the last big meeting before we actually go to war. It could be something that severe. It's very possible. So it could be anything. Like, I'm going to be very fascinated to see what this turns into, because it could be anything from something minor and stupid to something all the way up to potentially where the world's going to war. We just don't know.
I would have to say, folks, I'm gonna pre-tell y'all the outcomes and what we're going to say on air, so that way no one's saying that we're trying to take some sort of a political spin on this later. If this is a meeting for the discussion of war plans, or just getting everyone on the page that we're on the brink of war, and everyone's going to have to be getting their war plan scenarios updated, and they're going to be sending updates to them here in the near future, or give them to each of them depending on their theater command or their area of responsibility at that meeting, that will be something that I'll say, I mean, that was a little bit dangerous to do security-wise. We could have just sent in banker boxes on special flights to all of those commands, but that ended up being a pretty decent result. If it ends up being some sort of a stupid pep rally, or it ends up becoming something political where everyone has to kiss the ring of the president in person, or, something along those lines, that's going to be absolutely stupid, and that was completely pointless. And not only that, a major security concern at that. And then if it ends up being some sort of a purge where some people are called, activist generals or admirals, and they're told, if your name is called, get up, stand up, and walk out, you're done, that is going to be the stupidest thing that could be imagined. I mean, that's going to be the dumbest one of them all. So out of those three, I'm already going to tell you all that would be our reaction and our response to any three of those scenarios. I don't know which one it will be. Like, I have no leaning towards one or the other. I'm actually thinking it's probably one of the first two. It's going to be some sort of a pep rally or a kiss the ring moment, or it's going to be the discussions of actual war plans and telling everyone that it's the verge of war. Everyone's going to be getting new contingency plans here in the near future, and we're that close to the conflict. That one of those two, I'm thinking that's more of the likelihood. If it ends up being the third one, I'm going to tell you all that that's going to be absolutely outrageous just up front. But I don't know which one it will
Yeah,
be.
if it turns out, because once again, like to tie it back into that Putin speech that's coming up, I don't know what Putin's coming out to say. Like at this point, I'm really not sure what he could announce, but to make it that important to broadcast it across the entirety of Russia, I'm not really sure what he could be saying because he really has no good news to report. He can't report the economy's doing good because the Russian economy is failing. He can't report on good frontline maneuvers because they're still losing on the front lines. There's really nothing positive to say in a speech. So typically when that's the case, politicians do not come out and make speeches. But yet at the same time, though, we're seeing Putin make a very, very publicized speech sometime this week. So it makes me think it's going to be something negative. That's what I sort of lean towards. Putin's going to be saying something of an escalation or something of that nature. So I don't know what it could be. I don't want to fearmonger here, so I'm not going to speculate too much on it. But Putin could be announcing something severe. There's no telling.
Possibly. But also, on that note, folks, before we move on into the rest of our news, and hopefully we can also get up a question on the Chinese here really soon in the chat, so that we can talk about that here in a moment, considering that that's a huge piece of news we're about to move on from. We want to make sure to take a brief moment, though, to talk about the fundraiser that we're running tonight, because it's gotten up to a whopping $1,953 raised in about an hour, and that is absolutely insane.
Wow.
Humongous right there, and I gotta say that it's an absolutely wonderful and incredible thing to see the Lee Spring Army is rocketing towards the fundraiser goal, and looks like they're going to be hitting it here very soon, probably within the next 10 or 20 minutes, hopefully. But I also want to make sure that we take a brief moment to shout out all of those top donors. We wish that we could shout out every single one of y'all, all of the top donors and every donor in between, but there's usually so many folks who donate to these fundraisers. It would be incredibly hard to be able to list off every single one of y'all. I do want to let y'all know, though, that we appreciate each and every one of y'all equally, whether you're throwing in $1 or hundreds of dollars or even thousands of dollars to fundraisers. I know that each one of y'all are doing your very best to try and support these things, and we massively appreciate y'all for going through the effort of supporting them at all. If it wasn't for all of y'all put together, this fundraiser wouldn't be able to make it. If we just had the top donors supporting the fundraiser, it would have made it to half of where it is right now. If we had all of the other donors who were supporting this fundraiser with smaller amounts, and we didn't have any top donors, we would still only raise half the amount of what we have right now. It is the entirety of the Lee Spring Army together and its combined abilities that make these fundraisers succeed every single weekend. And so, with that in mind, Matthew, who are our top donors for the night?
All right, so we are jumping into our list of top donors thus far, and shouting out our first one here, we had a 100 from Peace with War. He threw that into the fundraiser. Also, a big shout out to Hal Rose, who threw in a 100 as well, along with Activista, as well as Bobo Vasquez and James Hughes, who also threw in a 100. We also had a 50 from Samuel Szymanski, as well as Mike, and also Eugene Haynes, Skip Tracer 007, and also Cliff H, who threw in a 50 as well. And a huge shout out to all of our top donors thus far. And also, by the way, if I happen to miss your donation and it's above $50, let me know, because I'm calling all those off, and hopefully I didn't miss any of them, because tonight the chat's been running wild and I might have missed it. So let me know if I did and I'll shout you out. But in the meantime, though, a huge shout out to everybody for helping to get us up to $2,000 raised so far. We are just about less than $500 away from hitting the goal. So very good progress tonight. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say that I would have to be entirely appreciative of each and every one of y'all for getting this fundraiser to where it is and continuing to get this thing on up higher. It's an absolutely amazing and incredible thing to know that we have raised $2,016 at this point, and we are getting about less than $500 away from reaching that $2,500 fundraising goal. An absolutely incredible and amazing thing. And I gotta say that it's a wonderfully amazing thing to know that the Lee Spring Army, years down the road, are continuing to support these fundraisers and get them well over the fundraiser goals each and every single night, without fail. And so with that, we will be making sure to address a couple of questions as well, about 3 live chat questions, and also any super chats that we've happened to get tonight, because YouTube still hasn't fixed that loophole. And then we'll be moving on into the rest of the news for the night. So Matthew, what do we got?
All right, so jumping into our first 3 live chat questions, this one goes to AF Kaplan first, and he said, how long could Taiwan hold out against a China invasion without outside support from allies?
I would say that they can most likely hold out for months or up to a year, considering the incredibly difficult situation of conducting an amphibious landing, and also the fact that Taiwan's military has heavily emphasized anti-ship and anti-air capabilities. It would be really difficult to get through Taiwan's air and ship defense shields that the military largely has to be able to get to conducting a naval invasion in the first place. So I would have to say that I'm assuming that Taiwan could probably hold out for about 6 months to a year entirely on its own without any foreign support. And also, before some people say, well, the Taiwanese, considering they're facing down the whole of China, might just try and pack up ship and leave. If the Chinese Navy conducts a blockade of the island, there is no escape for anyone there. If a commercial airliner tries to fly out or a government plane tries to fly out with the government on board, they're getting shot down and killed, every single one of them. So the government would be stuck there, the military would be stuck there, everyone would be stuck there on that island without any way to escape. And so they would pretty much just have to fight it out or entirely give up in the first place, which I have a feeling, considering that a lot of these people would know, at least in the higher up leadership, that they're going to end up being re-educated, quote unquote, by the Chinese or executed because of their rebellious tendencies on the island. They're most likely going to be encouraged to fight to the death at that point, because what other alternative would there be? So considering that, I would say they probably would last for about 6 months to a year without any foreign support. With foreign support, they could probably make it through just fine and end up surviving with a decent amount of wounds, to put it that way. But with no support, 6 months to a year at best. But with that, I hope that does address that the best I can, at least from what I would know. And with that, we are on to the second to last question of this segment.
All right, so this one goes to Paul Jenkins, and he said, "What do you think about 31 Atlas, and do you think it's related to any of the recent announcements?" Now, I will say, Paul, to me, that seems, no offense, by the way, I'm not saying this to offend you, but it seems to me like a conspiracy theory. Also, to clue y'all in case y'all don't know what that is, that's a comet that some people are speculating could be some type of spacecraft, I believe it is, or something of that nature. I think that's the same one. I think they call it some type of like spacecraft or some alien UFO or something like that. I'm not really sure what they're saying about that, but I really don't put much stock into it. I think it's a bunch of hype and hot air, personally. I think that's just something that people are grabbing onto and running with just to have a story. So I don't really put any stock into that. I think it's a conspiracy. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to be honest, I would also be in that camp as well. The reason why is because this story it didn't just pop up recently. This is actually a story that was made 4 years ago by the very same professor from Harvard, if I'm not mistaken. And that story was made way back then, during the midst of some guy his name is quite familiar. He owned a private island and he ended up dying in a New York prison. And around that time, that story came out for the first time. And now a couple of years later, it's come out again. And now it's once again an imminent threat to the planet like it was 4 years ago. So I would have to be honest, considering the coincidence, the odd coincidence that this story emerges almost like to distract everyone from another major story going on, I'm generally doubting that that's even a real deal. It's most likely just a comet that's traveling through the area, and that's about it. Because considering that it's been said before 4 years ago, and it didn't come true back then. And it was literally said the exact same way. If you don't believe me, you can pull it up. And there are articles, I believe, from like 2021, early 2021, that literally said this comet is an alien spaceship. It's coming to the planet. It's going to kill us all in a couple of months. And it never did. And 4 years later, it's once again coming right towards the planet. It's going to kill us all in a couple of months. And it comes out, oddly enough, at a time that there was a huge amount of attention on a specific sort of a story that's coming around. So I would generally have to say I don't really believe that deal all too much at all, and I don't really feed into it too much. So I would doubt that it would be on that topic, just because I generally find the story to be bogus, at least in my personal opinion. But a lot of people put some credence into it.
Also, by the way, the comet is real. Like, I see people saying, was the comet even real? The comet is actually real. Like, that's the only, like, in my personal opinion, that's the only real part of the story. The people saying it's some type of alien spacecraft are merely speculating based on TikTok reels and things like that. So, you got to take things like that with a grain of salt. So far, I would say it just appears to be a comet. I'm no space expert, but it looks like a comet is just passing close to Earth. It's going to pass by Mars and go out of the solar system. So it doesn't appear to be anything crazy to me. It's not, it's not sending out like radio frequencies or something like that, at least from what we've heard. So I don't know why people are making a huge deal out of it, honestly.
And I would give you all a little bit more detail, but Matthew actually was talking about that story when it first came out, and I said, wait a minute, that's a little bit weird because it came out a little while ago in I think the summer of this year. I said, wait a minute, that's a little bit weird. I swore I heard this before. I pulled it up, and Matthew can verify this. The same story almost, it was almost identical, was run in 2021 about a comet that looked like an alien spaceship that was coming to Earth within a couple of months. Don't you remember me pulling that up, Matthew?
Yeah, I remember something like that. I can't remember if it was from the same guy or not, but there was a similar article somewhere else.
I'm pretty sure, and I'll have to do a little bit more digging on this to make sure. I'm pretty sure that it was the same guy because both of them were, I think, Harvard professors. I think it was the same guy actually, if I'm not mistaken. I'll have to look into it a little bit to make sure. But I think it was the same guy who made the same story back then and then now. And I'm like, huh, that's a little odd. And it's almost got the same storyline to it as well. But anyways. With that, I hope that addresses that the best I can. And we are on to the final question of this segment, and then we're going to be moving on into the rest of the news.
All right. So this one, our last one here, is going to go to Uncovered Cube. And he said, if Putin's mind is set on ending this war the way he wants to, then how do we change that as NATO?
And can you read that one again really quickly?
Yeah, he said, if Putin's mind is set on ending the war the way he wants, how do we change that as NATO?
There really isn't a way to change that. Like a lot of people always like to think that everything is within our power. Unfortunately, something like that is not within our power. So we just have to react the best way that we can to the situation. And however it turns out after that is how it turns out. But we can only control our end of the situation. We really can't control what the Russians are thinking or how they're going to react or how they're going to work on anything. That's pretty much out of our control entirely at this point. So I hope that does address it the best I can. And with that, folks, it's time for us to move on into the rest of our news. But before we get on into the Middle East, I do want to make sure that we talk about the intelligence reports that were made that China is rapidly converting its civilian ferries into an invasion fleet for Taiwan. And what are people thinking about that, Matthew? And what are you thinking about that as well?
All right. So we saw today that apparently some news agency out there got their hands on some information from the U.S. Department of War, that's apparently called that now, or Department of Defense, whatever you want to call it. And the new intel is warning that China is rapidly finalizing its Taiwan invasion fleet to invade soon. And soon is the big question mark. So when do you think that is? And also, what are your thoughts on it? And 58% said China will probably synchronize with a Russian attack on NATO when they attack Taiwan, while 17% said it might happen without Russia's involvement, and 16% said China will probably attack Taiwan years from now. And this one's a hard one to predict, folks. Like that, we tried to make predictions on the Taiwan situation before, and they've fallen a little bit short. It's hard to say exactly when China's going to invade. Now, one thing that is clear though is they are rapidly developing these barges for an invasion. Like, there's no doubt about that. We're seeing it on satellite. We're also hearing about it from intel reports. So China is definitely gearing up for it. I don't think it's a question of if they're going to do it. It's just a matter of when. But saying when they're going to do it, it's like crystal balling. That's basically just taking wild guesses at it because nobody really knows but the Chinese government themselves. But on the question of whether or not they're going to synchronize with a Russian attack, I would say they probably would want to. I'm not sure if they're going to be able to actually pull that timing off just right because that's very tricky to do that. But I'm sure they'd want to because that would give China coverage. So that way NATO's distracted over there in Europe while they're trying to attack with Taiwan. And it could be that since NATO is so tied up in Europe that maybe they don't have the resources to respond and help Taiwan and they might just be left abandoned and left to China's mercy, basically. So, Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say that I would be with the 59%. I actually believe that the Chinese may be trying to synchronize their attack with the ongoing war in Ukraine and also the diverted attention in Europe, considering that that would give them a little bit of a better time trying to go to war with Taiwan. Because if the United States is guaranteed to support the Taiwanese in armed force, the United States would have to divide its efforts in the Pacific with those efforts that it would also be conducting inside of Europe at the same time. And also with the endless attempts by the Europeans to remilitarize at a rapid breakneck speed. And that also means that the United States war industry would be diverting a great deal of equipment and arms to the Europeans during that period as well. So I would generally have to say I would be with the 59%, and I'd also would have to generally believe that they would be trying to synchronize this attack. Also, really quickly, folks, I wanted to make sure to find this, and let me do a little bit of additional, let's see here. Let me go and pull this up. So, let's see. Is Atlas 31. Let's see here. So it actually is the same thing. So really quickly, I wanted to share this with y'all because some people were actually saying that the asteroids or the comets that were talked about were totally different. It actually is the same one, and I wanted to make sure to find this for all of y'all. Here are some articles. I specifically put this as the date to try and find it. You can see right here that on these articles, May 6th of 2021, there might be an alien spaceship comet making its way to the planet with aliens on board. It's now being floated around again, and back then it was called the Oumuamua, and apparently nowadays that's now being called the Atlas 31, or the 31 Atlas, which is the exact same asteroid or comet, as you can see right there. This story was first came up by this very same professor 4 years ago in 2021. And just to, like, I'm not trying to feed in conspiracy theories here or anything like that, but I will let y'all know this. This was around the first time that the island with the people on it and the whole shopping list scandal popped up the first time. This story then emerged just about a month or two later and started making the rounds everywhere back in 2021. Now that happened again in 2025, this story pops up again and starts flooding around the place everywhere. So I'm not saying that it's a diversionary story that's supposed to draw everyone's attention away from what's going on, but the fact that the story did come up in 2021, as you can see right there from the BBC, and also again in 2025, it seems to me to be a little bit interesting that that's a coincidence.
Also, by the way, I think it's a different object, by the way. I think it is different. If you go and look, one's a comet, and also let me get these bots. We're like being overrun by bots right now, but I think it's a different object. Atlas is a different one, I believe, than the comet you were just looking at. It's a different asteroid.
So let's see here. Discovered by terrestrial. Let's see here.
And also, by the way, I also want to make this note real quick as well. The fellow, the professor that reported on this, we don't know exactly what he is saying himself. Now, obviously, journalists can take whatever they want, like information from the professor, and turn it into a sensational article saying aliens. We don't know what the professor said, by the way, so he might not be like feeding into this sensationalism. He could just be simply reporting his findings, which is totally fine. So take everything we say with a grain of salt about it. We're just looking at what we know right now, but it appears to be two different things. One's a comet and one's a different object.
So it actually does appear that this is a different object. So correction, folks, I'm going to have to eat my foot on that one. This is actually apparently different. I actually did see, though, and then in one article, which is why I said that, it said otherwise known as the Oumuamua, and I was like, okay, so it must be the same thing. Apparently, though, the AI overview is saying that it's actually a different, larger comet than the Oumuamua, and also multiple other articles are also saying that as well. So I have to give a retraction on air. That actually appears to be a false statement. They are two different comets, but still the same story is coming around again around a peculiar sort of a time. But moving on from that and on into the rest of the news that we have for the night, and moving us directly into the Middle East, which has had some significant developments over the course of the day, we have been able to hear that snapback sanctions have now been implemented against the Islamic Republic of Iran. And the Islamic Republic of Iran is apparently trying to skirt these sanctions immediately. According to some information that's been received by Maritime Executive and Bloomberg, Iran is funneling crude oil to China through fraudulent relabeling schemes, with a recent report showing ship-to-ship transfers off Malaysia now shifting to Indonesia. China imported an estimated 1.45 million barrels of banned Iranian crude through the January to August of 2025 period, and that was according to Maritime Executive and Bloomberg. We also were able to hear that the Islamic Republic of Iran is apparently trying to meet the Iranian-Pakistani Defense Alliance at the head, and also cause some fairly considerable issues, but we actually just hit the goal! Hey! We hit the goal!
We have smashed the goal! Jugga, jugga, eagle!
Let's go,
I'm
baby!
telling you what, look at that. We are $20 above the $2,500 mark right there. A huge shout out to the LSA for making that goal happen right there. And also, we did hit the goal about like 10 seconds ago or something like that. It took us a minute to get to it though, because we were distracted with the mama, the comment thing, whatever it was. But anyways, a huge shout out to everybody for making that possible tonight, by the way. A really good cause to help Ukraine once again, and thanks to the LSA, it was possible. But Enforcer, what say you?
Man, we're gonna call that the let's see, the Johnny Bravo comment from now on. Oh mama. But beyond that, we hit the goal! And I gotta say, an absolutely incredible and unbelievable thing to see that we have reached $2,520 on the fundraiser goal and have smashed another one. An absolutely wonderful and incredible thing to see. And we love to know that the Lee Spring Army bands together to get these fundraisers on up to where they're supposed to be. Truly incredible stuff. And a big shout out to all of y'all once again. And moving us back into the news, we did hear that the Iranians are trying to preempt the Saudi-Pakistani nuclear alliance or defensive alliance at the head, as the senior military advisor to Khamenei and former IRGC chief Yahya Rahim Safavi said that Iran should join the Pakistan-Saudi Arabia Mutual Defense Pact. If y'all don't know anything about the defensive pact, that defensive pact was made by Pakistan and Saudi Arabia because the Iranians are continuously posturing and threatening the both of them and have gotten in firefights on more than one occasions with the Pakistanis and also continuously threaten the Saudi Arabians with attacks by their terrorist proxy forces like the Houthis. The Iranians are pretty much trying to show the world in their own stupid way that this alliance has been made against them because the Saudis and the Pakistanis certainly won't allow them to join, but a lot of people seem to be missing on the weeds and believing that this is something else entirely, but still quite an interesting thing. On top of that, while the snapback sanctions went into effect today, the Iranian Parliament's Foreign Policy and National Security Committee spokesperson has now stated the activation of the snapback mechanism is a unique opportunity to develop Iran's nuclear industry, pretty much saying that now that the sanctions are back in place, they're just going to start working on nuclear weapons again. So, a little bit interesting with that. They also found a jet-powered Shahed near to the area of Basra within Iraq. We can see that jet-powered drone right there, taped off with red flags surrounding it, as the Iraqis are now investigating the drone. We've also heard that the Yemeni Houthis conducted a launch on Israel today, and that missile was intercepted over Tel Aviv. You can see that right here in this clip. There goes the interceptor. And we didn't see the interception, at least on that film.
Tell Aviv that they're all good tonight. That they took the thing down.
Man, Tel Aviv, man, get it? It's Tel Aviv. But anyway, so you also get to see that the Israelis are still considering that attack on the Iranians. It does appear that there are still more reports coming out that the Israelis are planning to attack Iran here within the near future. So it does appear that we'll be returning back to the Middle East as a regular news source once again on ongoing developments within the area. Moving on out of that, though, and into far east of the Russian Federation, we were able to hear that at this city of Komsomolsk-on-Amur, which is on the Amur River, that's why it's called Komsomolsk-on-Amur, there was actually a significant fire that broke out today at a strategic warehouse that stored materials and resources along with strategic reserves. That warehouse is on fire and was burning quite nice. Moving on out of eastern Russia then, and on into the rest of our news that came out of Europe today, another major drone incursion has been conducted over the whole of Europe over the course of the day. We were able to hear that a Norwegian passenger flight, had to be diverted due to drones entering the airspace of this city in Norway, which is directly along that part of the coast. Before we move on into the rest of this drone incursion news, though, I do want to ask you all about what those claims about the Israelis striking Iran are about. Are they real? Are they not? Are they somewhat real? Matthew, what are people thinking about that? And what are you thinking about that as well?
All right, so the Russians are claiming today that the U.S. and Israel are conspiring to plan new strikes on Iran very soon. And do you believe the claim? And 64% said yes, Iran will get attacked soon, while 15% said it's half true at least, and 12% said that Russia is lying like usual. And believe it or not, Russia's actually telling the truth this time. Believe it or not, they actually sprinkled a little truth in there to make it seem like they're not lying all the time. But just because the clock is right once a day doesn't mean it's not broken. And Russia's clock has been broken for a minute. And also their horse stables need cleaning. But at the same time, though, I think Iran will get attacked soon. I think it's coming very, very soon because Iran is openly saying now that they're back to their nuclear program. We're seeing Pickaxe Hill, which is near the Natanz nuclear site, is also rebuilding itself, or rebuilding with the Iranians' help, of course. And this seems to be an ongoing issue. The Iranians are going to develop a nuke. They're developing rocket technology of ballistic missiles and things like that. So unless the U.S. is going to let them develop a nuke, then they got to do something. And Israel, being in the region, is going to be involved in it. So Russia was right this time, but that's going to be pretty much the only time they were right. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say that, in my opinion, I believe that the Iranians are going to begin an attack soon. They're still working on nuclear weapons and also their missile programs, which is absolutely unacceptable to the United States and Israel, so they're begging to get bombed again at this point, and that's probably going to happen here quite soon. So with that, I hope that does address that the best I can, at least from what we would know. And with that, it is time for us to move on back into the drone incursion stories over Europe, as we also were able to hear of additional drone incursions that happened around the area of the Bucharest airport, the Otopeni. After a drone had been spotted, we were able to hear that the airspace was shut down, and it does appear that that is another drone incursion that we've been able to report of on the past 24 hours. Another drone incursion did happen near to the Danish island of Bornholm, which is right here. This island, in this area right here, in the middle of the Baltic. This island is actually special, as this island is the birthplace of the program to try and bring back the European bison from extinction. And a lot of European bison that are in Europe right now are actually found on this one island. Apparently, drones were spotted around it, and the Danish did respond by scrambling jets. They must protect the European bison at all costs. And some people actually didn't know this, but there were bison that roamed all of Europe at a point, and also generally went pretty much entirely extinct, a lot like their American counterparts, the American bison. The conservancy efforts pretty much started off at Bornholm, and it's not really a full-blown European bison because they quite truly did go extinct. This is kind of a genetic mix of multiple different bison, including that of the American bison, and the American bison is also a bit of a bastardization as well, as they had to use some genetic information from American cattle to try and bring back the American bison as well from near extinction. So a little bit of an interesting part of the story of conservancy, at least from what I've heard. But here's the existent range of the European bison as they exist in Europe currently, and there are some that are being conserved and re-expanded out of the Bornholm area. But anyways, moving on from that, we also get to hear of a drone incursion near to the area of the Swedish naval port of Handelshamnen, which I'm pronouncing terribly, but this area is home of the Swedish Navy, and this is where their ships are primarily moored and operated from. And there were drones that were flying directly over this area today, and I'll show you all the clip of that right here. But there it is. It's that dot.
Man, what if it turns out this entire time that these drones are simply invading NATO airspace because they're hunting for Swedish fish? Like they were trying to find those delectable confectionaries out there, and they were trying to go find them in the water. That's all they're doing the whole time. They're just scanning for Swedish fish.
Man, you shoot one of these drones down, and then you walk up to it, and as soon as you do, a speaker goes off. What are the charges? Searching for fish? A succulent Swedish fish? How dare you, sir? Get your hands off my propellers! But anyways, we did get
Man, damn.
we did also hear that the Germans are going to be deploying a Sachsen-class air defense frigate, the Hamburg, into the Baltic to try and help bolster air defense within this region for the NATO alliance. On top of that, we also were able to hear that there was apparently some sort of a possible suspect vessel that was in the area. Allegedly, the Mikhail Dudin, which is a Panamanian-flagged bulk cargo ship linked to the Russian Ministry of Defense, is currently loitering off of the coast of Storkö, Sweden, to the north of the Danish island of Bornholm in the Baltic Sea, incredibly close to both spottings or sightings of the drones over Bornholm and the Swedish Naval Yard. Some people have believed and alleged that this ship may be involved in that. We're not entirely sure, but it is something to point out just in case there's any further details or developments on that situation. In the meantime, Denmark has also stated, according to their Prime Minister, that they are taking the drone situation seriously. According to Thomas Danielsen, who is the Danish Transport Minister, he stated the recent suspicious drone activity is unlike anything seen since World War II, and, quote, our airspace has not been violated like this since then. We take it extremely seriously. We also were able to hear confirmations by the Danish government that apparently some of these drones did fly over defense bases during their airspace incursions, which is also somewhat concerning to hear. Nevertheless, many people have been talking about the ongoing development with the shadow tankers, as the president of Ukraine has actually taken a rare moment to weigh into European affairs as of today. He has stated, according to his information and according to his intelligence. Actually, we're going to have to break for a moment for some breaking news.
All right. So, yeah, it's time for breaking news right now. And right now, we're getting word that residents in eastern Poland are reporting the sound of fighter jets overhead near the border with Ukraine. And I want to remind people right now, there currently is no major attack underway against Ukraine at the moment. Based on what we're seeing, it looks like the areas bordering Poland are generally clear of any type of Russian attack right now. So, not entirely sure what this is right now, but we're hearing reports from the ground in eastern Poland, which borders Ukraine, that apparently there are F-16 or fighter jets going at high speed around the border. So it's possible that maybe it's simply an exercise or maybe some type of training that they're conducting, or it's possible as well that maybe it's some type of new drone incursion that's happening right now as well. But considering how tense the area is, it seems unlikely to me that it would be training. So whatever the case is, at least according to eyewitnesses right now, there are fighter jets flying over the area in big numbers. But Enforcer, what say you?
I'd just say that that's a fairly interesting development to hear, and we will try and keep an eye on that and see what else we're hearing about from that area. Hopefully we'll get video and picture evidence to be able to confirm that information. In the meantime, though, Zelensky did state that, according to him, there is intelligence and information that the Russians are using tankers to launch and control drones that they launch against European countries, largely stating that the Europeans are lacking and that they need to get off their ass and get to shooting these things down. But Matty, what are people thinking about that? The claims that Zelensky made today about these drone incursions, and what are you thinking about that as well?
All right, so we are hearing Zelensky claim today that apparently Russian shadow tankers are allegedly responsible for sending drones into NATO airspace, all these different incursions. And what are your thoughts? 76% said it sounds likely it probably is the shadow tankers, while 10% were unsure, 7% said it sounds like warmongering by Zelensky, and 7% said it sounds unlikely it's something else. And it's certainly not warmongering. There's definitely a logical explanation for why there's drones violating NATO airspace. So warmongering is like the new, like, what is it? Like grifters? Like, it's like the new buzz term.
New catch-all.
Yeah, it's like if you want to just discredit somebody, you call them a grifter, you call them a warmonger. That's basically what people say these days, and it means nothing at this point. They've diluted the meaning of the term. So I would say, honestly, it sounds likely to me that it could be the case. My original assumption was these drones might have been coming from Kaliningrad or maybe from a Russian ship, a naval ship that is, somewhere in the area. So I was banking on it being Kaliningrad, but Zelensky says, or at least claims, that he has evidence showing that it's Russian shadow tankers. So if it is, that might explain why NATO's having a harder time detecting where it's coming from, but it still doesn't explain the NATO inaction, though, because so far NATO has not really taken action against these drones, even if it is coming from a Russian shadow tanker. So I would say it sounds like it could be likely. I have to be with the 75%, but hopefully Zelensky actually shows that evidence, because so far he said he has evidence, but he really hasn't shown the evidence right now. So, Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say, first off, to address the catch-all words, because some people say grifter, some people say warmonger. I would have to say, whoever called us a warmonger, your mom's a hoe. But moving on from that.
Damn.
Oh, damn. Like, oh, dang. Like, oh, God. Busting, no cap. But beyond that, I would have to be with the 75%. I would have to say that it sounds likely, and it's some sort of a Russian vessel within the area that is launching the drones. That would be the most reasonable sort of an explanation that we could make. But I would have to say that there really isn't anything else to really deduce from this, you know? Like, think about it, everyone. Think about it. There are drone incursions happening over the whole of NATO. Nowhere else. All of NATO. So clearly this is being done by a hostile country. What hostile country is within the area? None but Russia. So who in the world could it be? I mean, like, there's literally, like, this is like saying, okay, we live in O Block in Chicago, and this one block is run by one single gang in the O Block. A murder just happened. Who the hell could it be? It's like, well, clearly, most likely the gang that's here at this block would probably be the one that's responsible for this. They're in the area. They would be the likely suspect. Like, I don't know why in the world we act like this is a mystery, but it's just like, who in the hell would be launching this many drones into Europe if it's not the Russians? The Iran? What, like, Iran is launching this many drones into Europe for what aim? What are they getting out of this even? They would get nothing out of it. China? No, why the hell would they do that? Like, that doesn't make any sense either. Russia is literally saying that they're at war with NATO. Like, that's exactly what they say every day nowadays. They were saying that they were in a state of war with NATO. If anyone would be conducting any hostile actions against NATO and flying drones over our airspace, it clearly would be them. Like, there's no other deduction that could be made at this point that would be less obvious than that. It's the Russians, and they're most likely launching it from ships in the area. That would be the most likely deduction to make from that as well. But anyways, With that, I hope that does address that the best I can, at least in my opinion. But I would have to say it's definitely the Russians, and I would have to say that Zelensky's probably correct on that. Moving on from that, however, the Moldovans had conducted a little bit of a police raid today on 3 individuals. They had orchestra music, apparently, but before we show that clip, Moldovan police and security services have detained 3 people accused of preparing mass unrest after today's elections. Authorities say 2 of them are brothers linked to security structures in Transnistria, suspected of coordinating and supplying protest groups. Here is the video of them being arrested.
I tell you what, this is becoming commonplace there in Moldova, it seems like.
Yes, election violence in Moldova. Oh my goodness, is that a bag of, like, what the hell is this?
What is that, fireworks or something?
Oh, what's on that phone?
Bro, what they got is a screensaver, bro.
What the hell is that even?
Hey, they've got American dollars. Look at that. They're rich.
Oh, damn. Like, bro, they loaded. Let's see here. He's got a Moldovan identity card, a Transnistrian identity card. He also has another Moldovan identity card, and then another Transnistrian identity card. So this guy's got all of the identity cards. This guy's collecting them like Pokemon.
Honestly, though.
You see them now arresting the others.
Well, they're really putting this in this guy's face. Oh, look, they're giving him a little bit of a hat treatment here. Oh, a little bit of window treatment. Oh man, this guy right here, he shouldn't have done what he did.
Man, why in the world did this guy have that look like Willem Dafoe right there?
Guy has that look right there, like the Moldovan authorities might not play around.
Man, he kind of has that look of, I already regret my actions. Please don't hurt me. But anyways, moving on from that, it's time for us to get on into the rest of the news that we have coming from Ukraine. As we were able to see in our location unknowns, a real hype fest going on. This was one hell of a thing to see. So they're listening to a song in this video before they go to the front lines in Ukraine called F Up NATO, something along those lines. And the whole song is about effing up NATO, like just, you know, killing everyone in the alliance, all that sort of a deal. And they're all sitting around. They don't really seem to be hype, and also the music is pretty ass. I had to show this to y'all because it was just a peak comedy in its own right. So you can already tell the music is crap. We're going to mute it from here because I can't handle that too much. But look at this hype crowd.
Oh, they are hyped. There's one guy right there that's really, really getting into it. He's really raising his fist there.
You can tell by the stance that this guy has and also his blank facial expression and how his helmet's put on that he just got done taking a Tylenol.
He's waiting for it to kick in.
Bro, what, dude?
He said, I've got to tone this out with something. Tylenol will take the edge off.
Dude, back in the day, it was Quaaludes. Nowadays, it's that Tylenol craze.
Oh, dear.
These guys right here look like they're going to probably not be effective.
Why would we give that away?
Oh, I don't know. Kind of like the nonchalant, like I could give a damn type of attitude that every single one of these guys have. Oh, look. Oh, look. Hey, hey, buddy. How you doing?
Hello. Hello. But anyways, the casualty report was not that good today. I think a lot of these guys ended up getting turned into mints because it was bad. It was real bad. Miss Isak, the record stated that 454 drones shot down is the 4th highest daily loss of the war. There is an increase in troop and artillery losses, and 7 tanks is the highest since August 8th of 2025, and the numbers were not good today. We were able to see that 1,110 Russian soldiers were wounded and killed over the past 24 hours, along with 2 APCs, 131 supply trucks, 7 main battle tanks, 45 artillery pieces, 454 drones, and 1 MLRS. In general, quite a good day, and it is something to see that they are continuing to inflict those kinds of losses. Meanwhile, on the Vachansk front, we were able to see the Ukrainians getting the Russians on out of here as quickly as they can, expeditiously, as a matter of fact. I don't know what they're doing to the Bahakas these days, but it's getting really bad. Oh, right through the side window and right through the windshield. Oh, actually, that was right through the radiator. And here comes another.
Through the window and through the wall.
Till the sweat drops down there. Well, we can't continue that one on. Like, we can't keep going
I don't
from
know
there.
where that was going.
Well, that was just the lyrics of the song, my son.
Is that the song?
Yes.
They're going to have a strange thing called song.
You know, I just wonder. Oh, dang, that one kind of like literally drove right into it. We see them chasing down some kind of a vehicle. I can't even tell what it is.
Man, I bet these Russians right here are wishing that 31 Atlas alien spacecraft 3000 would come in and save them at this point, because this war is not going good for them.
Man, honestly, man, they're probably hedging their hopes more so on the whoa mama. Like,
Oh, Baba Yaga, please.
Please, we can't take this anymore, Baba Yaga.
whoa mama. Like, whatever the name of that thing was. Oh, look, it's a little camping tent down there. Also, this thing's kicking up some wind. Oh, what an outro.
Oh, look, look, a little bit of a card here at the end.
And moving on down the line and into the area of the Lehman front, we also get to see them doing something similar down here in an airstrike. This was filmed by the 63rd Brigade of Ukraine. Take a look at this. This building is here, and then it's gone. We've seen this so many times, but it's great every single time, because we know that that's an effective hit.
You know, anywhere else in the world, you'd have to get special permits for demolition, and you'd have to set up these large water sprinklers to cut down on the dust flying through the air. But the beauty of it being a war zone is you don't have to do that. The dust can just float freely.
You know, those stupid EPA regulations and trying to stop people from getting cancer, it's ridiculous, really, and lymphoma and all that. I mean, honestly, they ought to just let the dust flow free. Let's make construction demolition dust great again. Let's remove all the EPA regulations and see what happens. Anyways, we also get to see the 100th Brigade near Touretsk, also giving the Russians some Tourette's. And there goes a drone.
Have you ever been checked for Tourette's?
Oh, this Russian.
I haven't been checked recently. I guess I'll have to take a Tylenol.
Oh. Looks like the Ukrainians are about to give them one via direct express.
They said, are you in pain? Would you like a acetaminophen?
How do you say that?
Acetaminophen.
You gotta take Tylenol. Like, don't take it.
Remember, this is something important. I got my MD from a cereal box. You have to remember, folks, nothing bad can happen. Only good can happen. Don't take it.
Man, I always like it when people get their MD from a Wheaties box.
Man, I always thought, man, that Frosted Flakes was where it was at, me personally. I got my PhD from Tony the Tiger, MD. But moving on from that, we also got to see some Russians whining in Selotove because their position got hit by Ukrainian artillery. Up to your man.
Албаныч, что происходит?
This guy's
he
got
doesn't give a
nothing.
damn.
This guy's got nothing left. He's walking like it's all over.
Происходит пиздец.
Bro, he said it's a disaster, bro. Oh, man. Bro, he was walking like he was defeated, walked right up to that guy. It's a disaster. Like, and then just walked on off. Oh, my God. Oh, man. But beyond that, it's been a bad disaster today. The Russians have made practically no ground. They're taking a large amount of losses. It really is a disaster for a lot of them out there today. And on in the Zaporizhia front, it was also the same there. Okay, well, we'll be muting that. And we also got to see a little airstrike getting conducted here.
You gotta love that heavy metal, you know, like just heavy metal, heavy uranium. It honestly grates my ears, kind of like it's a toxic metal. Honestly, I don't care for that genre of music.
But you know, the Ukrainians really are laying down that heavy metal on the Russians. They're laying down that rolled homogeneous steel with cordite behind it.
Yeah, I guess you could say that. I guess you could.
Yeah, they're putting heavy metal in Russians. We also got to see them doing that here in the 44th Brigade down in Zaporizhia. There's a D-30. It's about to go. There it goes. It's gone.
Call in a drone strike. Hit them again. Gotta make sure you win the war. The war is something that you can't play around with too much. It's something really important. You have to remember. We didn't pay a lot of money for Reapers for nothing. I got to get a good return on investment.
Hello, my fellow Americans. Hit them with the Tylenol.
Oh man. Also, by the way, folks, like just to make this clear, like I always say this every night, just to make sure we're being clear here and nobody's misunderstanding. The Tylenol, like I don't know anything about Tylenol. I've always taken Tylenol. I've never had a problem with it. So we're just joking around with it, by the way. So don't take our statement seriously. It's all jokes and sarcasm.
Don't take our comments seriously. It's a joke. It's a prank. Take it like with a grain of salt, a little grain. Some people went, wow, that's a tiny grain of salt. And a lot of people said, wow, that's incredible. Like the salt mines couldn't make a grain that small. You'd have to send that through a sieve or a grinder or something like that to make such a small grain of salt. It's really crazy.
My fellow Americans, I want to make it clear. We're not trying to make any statements here that might be misunderstood. Don't get it twisted.
Gotta have them ribs.
And everything else too, with the trimmings.
With the trimmings. Oh, yeah. But anyways, moving on up to Kyiv. It's time for us to get to the speech from President Zelensky for the day, folks. It's time for us to get to it. We're absolutely losing it too early.
Go ahead.
I was waiting for you to do whatever you're about to do, but without further ado, folks, here's the speech. Peach!
Бажаю здоров'я, шановні українці. Сьогодні увесь день після російського удару тривала ліквідація наслідків у Запоріжжі, в Києві, Київській області, в інших наших регіонах. Більшість уражень – це звичайні будинки, це цивільні об'єкти, постраждали більш ніж 80 людей, на жаль, 4 людини загинули, і серед них одна дитина. Мої співчуття рідним та близьким. В Києві серед уражених об'єктів інститут Стражеска, це інститут кардіології, один з провідних медичних закладів нашої країни та всього нашого регіону в Європі. Там 2 загиблих, значні пошкодження однієї з будівель. Відновлення має бути якомога швидшим, і уряд повинен з цим допомогти. І загалом тільки в Києві пошкодження на 32 локаціях. Російський удар по Запоріжжю був надзвичайно жорстоким. На щастя, без загиблих, але тільки там, на Запоріжжі, майже 40 людей цієї ночі постраждало. Всім надається необхідна допомога. Я хочу подякувати кожному, хто залучений до рятувальних операцій. Усім дякую нашим працівникам ДСНС України, екстренці, лікарям, медичним сестричкам, поліцейським. Дякую комунальним службам. Були також російські удари по енергетичним об'єктам, і це вже, на жаль, традиційна така російська тактика. Росія намагається і в цьому році ударити по Україні блекаутом. Фактично, протягом цих тижнів, коли тривала Генеральна асамблея ООН, Росія буквально кожен день, кожну годину використовувала для ударів по Україні. Дуже підлі удари. І саме це характеризує Росію, те, що вони роблять, а не те, що вони говорять чи запускають різними сигналами по світу. Вони відкинули всі реальні пропозиції миру і заслуговують на дійсно жорсткий тиск. На тижні очікуємо рішень Європи щодо такого тиску. Щонайменше новий пакет санкцій має бути 19-й пакет. Особливо важливо, щоб санкції болісно ударили по російській торгівлі, енергоресурсами, по всій інфраструктурі танкерного флоту Росії. Тим більше зараз є інформація від розвідки, що росіяни використовують саме танкери для запуску та управління дронами, які запускають проти європейських країн. Це ще одне свідчення, що Балтійське море та інші моря мають бути закриті для російських танкерів, щонайменше для тіньового флоту. Також розраховуємо на сильні кроки Сполучених Штатів Америки. Ми говорили з президентом Трампом про те, що реально може підштовхнути Росію до зміни позиції та зупинити війну. Світ має інструменти, які спрацюють дійсно миротворчо. Сьогодні говорив з президентом Фінляндії, подякував йому за підтримку. Ми скоординували контакти з нашими партнерами і, зокрема, з Америкою. Важливо, щоб ми поступово просувались і до фіналізації гарантій безпеки. Тих речей, які можуть і цю війну допомогти закінчити і стримати Росію від будь-якої іншої агресії. Говорив також з прем'єр-міністром Норвегії. І про сьогоднішній російський удар було більше 500 дронів, з них шахедів близько 350, 48 ракет, в тому числі 2 аеробалістичні. Саме тому ППО для України незмінно перший пріоритет. Дякую партнерам, які допомагають. Норвегія серед них. Це один з найсильніших наших партнерів. Дякую тобі, Йонаса. Говорив сьогодні ще з Марком Рютте, генсеком НАТО, серед іншого про нашу програму Pearl. Програма працює, дуже активно допомагає, і це саме та програма, що дозволяє нам купувати американську зброю за кошти партнерів в Альянсі. І це такі речі, як ракети для Петріотів, ракети для Хаймарсів вже у Пьорлі. Є 6 держав, які надали кошти: Нідерланди, Данія, Швеція, Норвегія, Німеччина, Канада. Ще 6 країн заявили про готовність приєднатись: Литва, Латвія, Естонія, Люксембург, Бельгія, Ісландія. Дякую усім. Це те, що дійсно допомагає. Ми будемо на тижні разом з європейськими нашими друзями працювати, щоб якнайшвидше реалізувати домовленості по ППО. Обов'язково Росія відповідатиме за все, що робить. Дякую кожному в світі, хто допомагає Україні, нашим людям, нашій державі, нашій незалежності. Слава Україні!
Героям слава.
And that is the end of the speech, everyone, from the President of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, here on day 1,313 of the war. That's day 1313. The numbers, they line up. That's crazy. A lot like that comment. Everyone say your prayers. But nevertheless, it's time for us to move on into the second segment of this stream, where we get to talk to each and every single one of y'all. And boy, howdy, folks, is that a fun time? Oh, buddy, that is a fun time. We don't allow people to ask or answer that in any other way rather than it is the funnest of times. Because we get to talk about literally anything and everything. And it's a great and wonderful time. It's an incredible time. Because anything and everything is on the table. We can talk about everything except for religion, politics, climate change, or whether the A-10 is relevant in modern warfare. And some of y'all are thinking, why in the world is that one that we can't talk about, the A-10 Warhawk? Apparently that's a really divisive topic, and some people will die on the hill that the A-10 Warthog is relevant on the battlefield or not. And also we can't talk about climate change because that is something that gets people really, really angry, like insanely angry. And then religion and politics was just the baseline. But beyond that, it is time for us to move on into all of those questions and to get the chit-chat with all of y'all. But before we do, we have one last thing we have to do before we get to chit-chatting with y'all, which is to talk about this bowl. And so, Matthew, what are people thinking about this bowl, and what are you thinking about it as well?
Also, by the way, we got a hell of an influx of bots tonight. I don't know what it is tonight, but the bots are just flooding in here. I guess they see us raising money for Ukraine again for the Ukrainian charities, and they're getting upset. But I do have a question for the bots since they're here, and we know that they all like to get paid in rubble or potato or something. Do you get your potato revoked if you get banned out of a live chat? Like, I want to know, because every time I ban a bot, I'm like, is the bot going to go hungry if I ban them out of live chat? Like, is Russia not going to give them their potato if I get them up out of here like that? I don't know. Like, me personally, like, I feel for you. You're going to go find a new line of work, my friend, because you're not going to be able to earn your potatoes here. It's just not going to happen. You just can't stay around this chat. I'm what's known as the bot man. I got to get him out of here. I got to get him out of here. But anyways, jumping into our final poll right here. It says Denmark, Sweden, and Norway spotted drones violating their airspace yet again today. And how long will it continue? 67% said it will not end. It's the new normal, as the old buzzword goes. We love a new normal, right? 12% said it will end in a few days, while 12% were unsure, and 9% said it'll end in a few weeks. And honestly, I think it will end, unfortunately. I don't want to be morbid with this, folks, but this is my honest thoughts. If NATO does not act, I have a feeling that whatever adversary is launching these drones is eventually going to escalate these drone violations to the point of causing civilian casualties. I think it's going to come to that. So that's why I'm advocating for NATO to take action right now before whatever adversary is launching these drones can have the chance to hurt innocent civilians. That's imperative they do that, and they're derelicting their duties right now by not shooting these drones down. So that's my take. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to be honest, I would agree with Enforcer Matt on that. I would have to say that this is going to be the new normal, and it's going to be the new normal until they end up killing someone, which is a real shame, and I think that that should not be the case. But that's how it's done over here in the West, folks. We don't give a damn about anything until some people die unnecessarily because we didn't give a damn, and then we act like it's the craziest thing ever. And then also on top of that, what's even stupider is that the governments that didn't pay attention to this matter and deal with it proactively will then build a ginormous memorial to the people who ended up dying because of their own negligence. It's like that's something that really is quite annoying to me on a lot of instances, because that's usually how it goes. Like people will be out here like us screaming, this is about to end in disaster, people will end up dying, and they'll just keep ignoring it until people end up dying, and then, oh my god, who could have seen this coming? This is terrible. And then we'll react to it. It's terrible at that point because people have died. And then they'll also say, we're going to create a special commission to make these poor lost lives, no one could have seen it coming, we'll make them a memorial. And I'm like, we could have avoided the whole memorial and the whole commission to make the memorial and the fact that these people died because of this if we had just acted proactively and shot down the drones. But they won't, unfortunately. I would hope that they do grow a spine. I would be wildly surprised if they did shoot one of these down, but it appears that that sort of a spine is not yet seen, at least for now, by anyone that's in the Alliance at the moment. So we'll have to wait and see how this turns out. Hopefully we'll act sooner rather than later and save lives instead of unnecessarily losing some. But with that, I hope that addresses that well, at least in my opinion, and we are on to the next one.
All right, so it's now time to move on from that poll. Excuse me, by the way. It's time to move on to our live chat questions. But first of all, though, we got some more top donors to call off because we're currently sitting at $2,825 raised of the $2,500 goal. So calling off the rest of our top donors here, we had a $150 come in from Uptown Drunk. And thank you very much, Otis, for that $150 to the fundraiser right there. We do appreciate that. Also, Greg Carrier threw in a $100 as well, along with Tom S., who put in the $75, and Howard Turgell also threw in a $50, along with Snow White, who threw in a $50 as well. And a huge shout out to all 5 of y'all for throwing in that generous support and helping to raise money to help the Ukrainians once again. It's a huge honor that we're able to be here every single Sunday and make that happen. And we do appreciate every single one of you in the LSA very much. But Enforcer, what say you?
And I gotta say, it is truly incredible. And I also have to give y'all a huge shout out as well, because all of our donors, big and small, have come together tonight to make this fundraiser a reality and for us to get to the insanely large amount of $2,825 raised at this point, and hopefully even higher than that before the show ends for the night. Hopefully, I would hope. Wouldn't you all hope? I'd hope. Heavens, I'd hope. But still, I hope that does address that the best I can. And with that, folks, it's time for us to move on into all of the questions that we have for tonight, because there's quite a many of them, and we'd love to talk about all of those great and incredible questions, and sometimes comments that some people just happen to make. And so with that, Matthew, what do we got?
You gotta have hope. You gotta have hope. You cannot have hope. It's something you have to live with, a little bit of that hope. But anyways, it's now time to jump into our live chat questions. But first, believe it or not, we still have super chats tonight. Typically, we do not have super chats on Sunday night, but this is the last time that I'm going to announce this on the Sunday night stream. It looks like the feature is here to stay. So it looks like YouTube now allows people to throw in super chats on the fundraisers. So that's interesting. But by the way, this is the last time I'll mention that. So next Sunday when this happens, y'all will know it's just a YouTube thing now, and it's just simply the way it is. But jumping into our first one here, a big shout out to Old Warrior for putting in a $20 donation, and we appreciate that very much, good sir, for that support. He said, Umama, or Uumuamua, was cigar-shaped and showed outgassing as it left the sun, making it a comet. 31 Atlas is round. Also, it's not 31, it's 3, meaning third, and I for interstellar, and Atlas stands for Asteroid Terrestrial Impact Last Alert System.
Oh, I thank you for the support. And I thank you for helping this channel to keep running and sharing that critical information with us. I don't know a lot about these rocks in space. I just look at them all as rocks that travel around. So generally, I do thank you for the support and sharing that with me, because that's something new to me. So big thanks to you once again. And also, folks, I've got to say that it is quite interesting that some rocks just happen to float in from elsewhere, because all of these are from outside the solar system. They just kind of float in and then they float right back out wherever the hell they came from. But anyways, I hope that is addressed the best I can. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right. Also, by the way, I'm trying to check on something that people are saying in the live chat to see if this is indeed true. Let's see here. So we are getting some possible breaking news right now. Take this with a grain of salt, folks. I'm currently seeing this from one source on Twitter. I'm seeing a source, and I'm not going to name them right now just in case it turns out to be something that gets retracted. I'm going to wait on those, but take this with a grain of salt. This is what I'm hearing right now through the grapevine. We are hearing that the U.S. officials have allegedly authorized Ukraine to carry out long-range drone and missile strikes against targets inside of Russia, though some strikes will require additional approval from the Pentagon, according to what we're hearing right now. So it sounds like the U.S. is changing their position dramatically about how Ukraine can strike Russia and what weapons they can use. So that's big news right there if it turns out to be true. So I'm trying to get some more corroboration of that to see if that is indeed the case. But Enforcer, what say you?
That is quite large news, I'd have to say. That's very interesting to hear. We'll have to see if that is confirmed. We'll mostly get confirmation of that by tomorrow. But that is very interesting to hear and hopefully accurate. And so with that, I hope we addressed that well. And with that, folks, it's time for us to get on into those questions at large.
Yes, indeed. And also, by the way, I see people asking, what do y'all think about those tanker planes heading over to Europe? I did post about that on Twitter before we went live to actually cover that. Currently, we did see a large deployment of U.S. Air Force tankers heading over the Atlantic and toward Europe. And also, there were some more aircraft as well that were not appearing on ADS-B. They were also in tow with the tankers. And unfortunately, we don't have that to say publicly for what those aircraft are. So, honestly, I really couldn't tell you what that is. It could be a normal rotation of tankers. It could be normal, or it could be preparations for a strike against maybe Iran. It could be a preparation for war with Russia. There's just no telling. But it was a very large deployment, though, that we did see. And also, by the way, me and the Enforcer actually saw tanker movements yesterday over Birmingham, Alabama, and that did not appear on Flight Radar 24. Apparently, it was off ADS-B, and it was not being tracked. And we actually saw that with our own eyes yesterday when we went outside and looked up and touched grass. So we actually saw that. And we're like, oh, look, it's tankers right there. That's pretty interesting. But Enforcer, what say you?
I'd have to say that touching grass was really a fun thing. And also we did see those happenstance. It was two KC-135s, and they were just flying around Birmingham. They were heading eastwards. So you know that was yesterday. So that's long since passed. No longer an OPSEC issue. But that was quite interesting to see and note. And it could be possible that this is some sort of a normal rotation, or it may be a forward deployment of tankers for some sort of an air operation. It's just a little bit hard to tell at the moment. We'll have to see what we get as the days pass by. And so with that, I hope that has addressed that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next super chat goes to Duncan VR, and Duncan put in a 15. And thank you very much, Duncan, for that support right there from Australia. He said, have a burger or 2 burgers on me, and ba meow quack.
Hey, ba meow quack. And we will have a burger or 2 on you. We actually had a burger today, and it was quite delicious, really. I actually quite liked that. And I was like, wow, that is a decent burger. But still, a humongous thanks to you so much for the support. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Silent Killer. And thank you very much, Silent, for that $10 support. They said, keep up the good reporting. And y'all kept us informed while we were in the Middle East during the 12-day war. And was wild to see it live. And honestly, Silent Killer, that's the reporting days I live for. Like, those are like adrenaline-filled and crazy days when we report on stuff happening live like that. I love those. Like, now, obviously, I don't love the war part of it. That's not good. Like, wars breaking out is not a good thing. But I enjoy being able to bring y'all the coverage of it with the Enforcer live on air when it's happening, because that's something that the mainstream media can't keep up with anymore. And generally on YouTube, nobody does it quite like we do when it comes to keeping up with it in real time. People cover it later, but not really in real time. It takes a lot of effort to do that. that, and most people can't keep up with it. So I'm very proud of those days right there, and also we're glad to have you. But Enforcer, what say you?
I gotta thank you so much for supporting the kind words. And those are days that we absolutely live and breathe for, breaking news days where we can cover the developments live on air when they're happening. That's usually quite rare, and we wait for major news events to happen so that way it's an endless feed of information that we're getting for all of y'all on what's going on. And those days are something else. And another thing that really is great about those is that we've had folks that were over there, that I personally knew of, folks I knew in the Air Force and so on, that would tell me after they got back from being over there, they were like, man, I was over there and we were listening to your show in the bunkers and shelters at those air bases and listening to you tell us about the next Iranian missile barrage 5 minutes before the air raid sirens even went off at our base. So like we were really proud about that sort of stuff, hearing that kind of feedback from folks from over there, and we love to know that people have just absolutely adored that sort of a coverage here from the channel, because we put as much effort into this as we can possibly do. Like, we put 110% effort into it. So when people sit there and say stuff like it really meant a lot to them, they really got a lot of information out of it, or they were, in the armed services listening to us talk about it, and actually, were in it and seeing that we were getting information about 5 to 10 minutes before it actually happened or came over their area, that is just really cool. I mean, an amazingly cool sort of a thing. And also, Silent Killer, I gotta say thank you so much for also having that exact same sort of a story to hear, because it's crazy to know that folks from the armed forces listen to our show, and we're in the midst of that, and it was happening like we were reporting it a couple of minutes before it made it to y'all's area. That's just wild to think about, honestly.
Isn't that crazy too? Like the soldiers over there in the Middle East that are literally in the area are getting their news first from OSA analysts, which are us here on YouTube, versus hearing it from their commanders first. That's crazy when you really think about it. Honestly, like we've come up with a very, very efficient way with getting that information very quickly, and that's why I'm so proud of those live news days that we do live on air, because it's something very hard to replicate. And sometimes we have to issue retractions for certain things on those days, but most of the time, a majority of the information is up to date, real time, accurate, which is insane. And mainstream's never been able to do that, by the way. Like, they've not been able to copy that because their way they operate just simply doesn't allow for it. So it's just very fascinating. I love those days.
Yeah, it's the greatest days, and I got to thank you so much for supporting and enjoying it, and also being over there in the midst of it, doing your part, and also hearing about what was about to be coming over your area a couple of minutes before it happened. So humongous thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that well. And also, really quickly to address something, because I saw someone say, "What's with all the jokes? People are dying." I'm gonna give a little bit of a minute. We have a lot of new viewers tonight to address that, because some people always want to come in and make a comment like that, or some people do, a few do, and I'll address it really quickly. We joke on the channel because a lot of this is going to happen no matter what, either way. We've seen people, and I've personally seen people, who make everything into a crying fest, and that generally emotionally overwhelms people to where they can't handle hearing what actually is happening in the world. And that's something that I'm not really a big fan of. When I first started this channel, I wanted to be something that people could come on to the channel and listen to and understand exactly what was going on in a great depth of detail, because it would be simplified enough that people who have even little knowledge of how the military works would be able to know about it. And on top of that, to also make it light enough emotionally, even if it's heavy content, that people can take it and run with it. Treating this stuff like it's a funeral every day is mentally taxing. Very much so. And have you ever been around anyone who's in the military, or has ever dealt with war, or is in any sort of a first responder sort of a career or occupation, and deals with people who get their arms and legs blasted off because they were driving a motorcycle like an idiot, or they got in a car crash? A lot of people make jokes in that sort of a world, because if you treat it all with the seriousness that it requires every single minute of every single day, you're going to mentally break down, and you're going to end up being one of those people splattered on the roadside because you couldn't take it anymore. That's really kind of the brutal truth of it. So that's why we do this here on the channel. Social positioning, if you want to call it that, or virtue signaling, isn't really my thing. My thing is getting the news out. So if you like the channel and you like the jokes, thanks for enjoying them. If you don't like the channel and you don't like the jokes, there's many channels out there who treat everything like a somber crying fest and mentally overload you within weeks that you can go and pick from. But I'm generally never going to back off of that. We do this channel in a very deliberate sort of a way, and everything is strategically thought out and said and done on the channel with how we conduct ourselves on air to make sure that we're aligning with what we think is acceptable. So, I hope that addresses that well. But I also want to make it clear that that's not anything that's negotiable. Like, I'm addressing that to explain to you why that's done, but I'm not addressing that and explaining that as in there is room to change on that. So with that, I hope that addresses that well. And also, I'm not trying to get in a confrontation with you there. I'm just saying that for what it is. But with that, we are on to the next one.
So our next one here goes to Great Southwest Trains, who puts in the 5. And thank you very much, good sir, for that support as well. He said, music request to upload the LSA March and Star Spangled Banner that we see in the intro.
I would have to say that we could do that. It's just that the music releases generally don't do well and can actually hurt us in the algorithms a little bit, we found out, for our short war videos. So that's why I haven't done that for the Anthem and the LSA Anthem either, the white and gold. But we will try someday. We'll probably save that for a special day like the 4th of July next year and put it out. Or I may put those out as singles on the Patreon, but just make them free to access for folks to be able to listen to. So I hope that addresses that well. A big thanks to you for support, Great Southwest Trains. And I also got to say, we got a lot of railroad-related like account names in here. We got Santa Fe Railroad, Great Southwest Trains, and like a whole bunch of others at this point. And it's really cool to see that actually, because as many of y'all know, I do like trains, and I think they're really cool. But anyways, with that, we are on to the next one.
All right. And also, by the way, I see a fella in our chat here. He said, I work for a command that you guys mention daily. Sometimes I get the news first from your Twitter or YouTube from work, above the best. Honestly, thank you for that. Like, it's pretty cool right there. It's really wild that a lot of service members get their news from us first before they hear it from their post, which is quite wild to hear that. Sometimes I will admit, like, sometimes the military doesn't prioritize keeping people in the know unless you're like a top level commander or something, based on what I've heard. But it is good that everybody is in the know. So that way, when your commander does finally tell you about it, you'll be like, oh yeah, you can feign ignorance like you didn't hear about it, and then you can be like, yeah, I knew about that the whole time, like whatever. But it is kind of interesting though, they hear it here first of all places.
Yeah, it really is cool. I actually have a lot of people who say that to me personally, because I know people who are in the armed services a lot. I have a lot of friends who either were serving or are serving, and a lot of them will always say that sort of a deal. And it's really interesting because sometimes they ask me, like that's the really weird thing. They'll ask me what's going on and what they're about to get into. Like a personal friend of mine, and I won't get into names or details, but a personal friend of mine actually was asking me about what the big picture was in the Middle East and what we were doing there, because they were a part of it. So I explained the whole deal of what was going on during that time, why we're there, what we're doing, what the end goal is, what we're trying to achieve. And at the end of it, he was like, oh, well, that actually makes a great deal of sense. Okay, yeah, that like 100% makes sense. That's a good reason for us to be over there doing what we do. And I was like, yeah, that is exactly a big thing. Honestly, I think that that's something that the military should focus on a great deal, because one thing that the military does great is the carrying out of war. They're amazing at that, the best in the world from what we know historically. But one thing that the military doesn't do too well is get everyone on the same page in the military as to why we're in places doing what we do and why it makes a difference or why it would matter in the big picture. That isn't really something that the military ever conveys to its service members, especially those that are enlisted or the junior ranking officers. They don't really give that a lot to any of those folks. They just tell them that they have their marching orders, go out and do what you need to do. But I feel like if they actually did take a little bit of a while to explain to those soldiers why they were going somewhere and what they were doing there, even in the long-term picture, I feel like that would be very beneficial to a lot of service members of the military to understand why what they're doing is incredibly important for the nation. But still, a huge thanks to you once again. I hope that does address it the best I can. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Bruce Lee, who puts in a 2. And thank you very much, Bruce, for that $2 support. He said, for the Tylenol fund. And thank you very much for that, by the way, right there. Also, by the way, I didn't know this until the other day. Costco has like a big thing of like the normal like drug that is Tylenol. I think it is acetaminophen is the drug. They have like a big like bulk version of it there. Like I saw it on a little short video yesterday. I was like, damn. I was like, how much acetaminophen do people need like for something that large? Which is crazy. It's like I think I don't know how many pills are in the thing, but it's a lot in that bottle that they sell. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say, thank you so much for the Tylenol fund. As you can all tell, I pop Tylenols like candy. I'm big into trains.
Oh, no.
I'm just kidding. I'm just playing.
He's just joking.
I'm just joking. I'm just kidding, everyone. I'm playing around. I don't take Tylenol or Advils or anything hardly. Never really have. I'm just not a big fan of like taking any medicine. But beyond that, I do thank you for the support, and we will use it for some Tylenol, which is kind of like an emergency reserve fund for us, really, based off of how we've done it our whole lives. Like I'll have an absolutely head-splitting migraine, and I'll still refuse to take Advil, Tylenol, or anything because I just don't like doing it. And also, I also don't really think that it helps out too much because every single time I've taken a Tylenol or an Advil, it hardly does anything for me. I'll still have a really bad headache. It's just that it's slightly more manageable, but not by a lot. And also, I saw someone say in the chat, that's what briefings are for in the military. Yeah, that's what briefings are for to an extent, but usually briefings are about what someone is about to be doing literally. Like, okay, we're going to Afghanistan, here's your briefing of what we're about to be doing, taking, say, Bagram Air Force Base. That's generally what most briefings revolve around. It's not like a big picture, like here's the abstract of what we're actually doing, like we're going into Afghanistan because the Chinese are doing this and the Russians are doing that. Those sorts of explanations are very rarely ever given to most people in the military. That's something that's up at the highest levels, like at the levels of the generals in the Pentagon and at the brigade levels and so on, but that's not something that I've heard, at least from my friends in the service, is ever told to them much at all. As a matter of fact, most of them come to me asking me why in the world certain things are being done on a unclass sort of a picture of what the military is currently doing and pursuing around the world and what it means and why they would need to be a part of that at all. And I generally try and give the best answers I can give as to why they would be beneficial to the nation and to our alliance to do those sorts of things. But it doesn't really get told a lot to them, and I feel like that would be a huge benefit in the military, is to let folks know why the jobs they're doing, even the small ones that they're doing, have a huge purpose in the big picture, not only for the military, but for the nation as a whole and our benefit. That would really keep morale high, knowing that what they're doing really does mean something. It's not just doing something for the hell of it. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that the best I can. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right. And also, by the way, a big shout to Axel K. Just throwing in a $50 support to the fundraiser. And a huge shout to you, Axel, for that generosity and helping to keep the fundraiser rising. Almost up to $3,000 almost. It's getting close. But also a big shout to Backyard Brawl Brothers, who's put in a $5. And thank you very much for that $5 super chat, good sir. And we do appreciate that. He said, can you talk about the MS Estonia that sunk on this day in 1994?
MS Estonia. Let me actually go pull that one up. That one... Oh, I remember this one. This is the one that was really bad. So the MS Estonia was a car-carrying roll-on, roll-off ferry that had a removable bow section. And let me see if I can show that to you all in a picture. Where in the world is that picture? Oh man, where in the world's the bow? Oh, let me go just to Google Images. So the bow would flip open so that way they could load cars on and off. So the bow wasn't latched properly, if I'm not mistaken, and the ship got into a rough sea state somewhere within, I believe it was the Baltics. The bow literally pried right off, and water just started to flood into the ship from these massive waves. It filled up so quickly, I don't believe a large amount of people were able to escape the ship. It rolled over, kind of like the seawall ferry disaster in South Korea, and sank to the bottom, which this is kind of like a rough representation of what it looks like down there at the bottom these days. But a decent amount of people died in this disaster. I believe this actually changed a lot of maritime laws and safety procedures throughout the entirety of Europe after this incident. But this was then repeated with the seawall, the seawall ferry disaster in South Korea, which pretty much happened under somewhat similar circumstances, at least with the actual sinking of itself. But the seawall ferry disaster, or the sinking of the MV Seawall, was generally caused by gross negligence and incompetence of the company due to not following stringent naval standards and loading limits that were laid out by the South Korean government. They heavily overloaded the ship, especially on its upper decks, which made it top heavy. At At some point, the ship started to list, which led to a large amount of the weight just shifting over to one side of the ship. I believe it was the port side. And then that led to the ferry just pretty much tipping over within less than about half a minute, flooding with water rapidly and killing a large amount of the people who were on board. But generally, the MS Estonia and the MV Seawall are pretty much grouped in the same category of disaster, as it is generally the incompetent management or operations of ferry services, which led to a capsize and loss of vessel with a great deal of loss of life involved as well. So I hope that does address it the best I can. A big thanks to you for the support and also bringing that up, because it was a very unfortunate disaster and a tragedy for sure. Let me see if I can show y'all some of the sinking of the MS Estonia. There wasn't a lot of pictures taken of it, but this is actually the recovered bow section that actually sheared off of the vessel during the disaster, or the sinking more so. And I believe that's about all that's left of the vessel, if I'm not mistaken. The rest of it's underwater in the Baltic. Here's one of the life rafts, actually, and it also capsized largely because of the flooding of the waves and so on in the rough sea state that existed during that time. But still, I hope that does address that well. And it's, like, honestly, folks, naval disasters are incredibly interesting to me. Just crazy stuff. Like, I was actually listening to a really well-made video that is made by Part-Time Explorer, and I was waiting for him to make it. I knew he would make it one day, and he did, and I was like, oh, this is a great video. But it was the Sultana boat disaster, which many of y'all probably have never heard of this ship. But about the same amount of people died on the Sultana as people died on the Titanic in 1912. This is the deadliest maritime disaster that ever happened in American history. Most people don't even know about it because it happened literally right at the same time that Lincoln got shot in Washington. But this was an absolutely crazy one. Generally, once again, because of incompetence by the boat operators, they had allowed for their boiler to be their boilers to be poorly maintained, and that led to a disaster just outside, if I'm not mistaken. Let me go look at where it was. Yeah, it actually happened right outside of Memphis. I believe somewhere around this bend at Island 40 Chute, somewhere around here. But the boiler actually exploded as they were trying to get the ship across to the other bank of the Mississippi on its western side, and the boiler exploded, which led to the entire center of the ship caving in. A massive fire broke out. Nobody knew how to swim back then, so that was an absolutely lost hope. And so a lot of people ended up just literally falling into the burning boilers and pretty much burning alive, or died in the fires, or died jumping off the ship and then drowning because they didn't know how to swim. It was an absolutely horrendous disaster, and what made it worse is that pretty much everyone who was on this ship was a Union prisoner of war that had just been released from Confederate prison camps at the end of the Civil War and were being put back on the ship, a lot of them in incredibly bad conditions health-wise, to be returned back to the northern states and to go home at the end of the war. So they had gone through years of terrible conditions in the Confederate stockades because they were overcrowded, and then they got on an overcrowded ferry, pretty much a steamship, and then went up the river, and most of them met their end in the middle of the Mississippi River on the Sultana. Not a lot of people survived it. And that also, I guess you could kind of say that's kind of like in the MV Seawall and the Estonia sinkings or disasters. This is kind of a similar vein with the mismanagement or something along those lines. But anyways, I hope that does address that the best I can. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one here is a $4 super chat from Tom W. He said the best channel to stay in the know out of all of them.
Hey, and thank you for the kind words and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And it is now time to grab our Morse code decoders of the stream. And tonight we had Paul Schultz, Kevin J, Mason Miami, Joni Dog, Norm Pritchett, Errol Garbo, Heroic Fluff and his Kush, Copio Terex, and Sire. They said the Morse says this. Guess what? It says this. It says Russia doesn't have the power. The lights are off. The gas is out. LLT LOC.
And that's the sound of money. Y'all got that dead on the nail. That was the Morse code message of the night. I gotta congratulate y'all greatly for getting that correct. Y'all get that correct every single night that it's run. And I gotta say that that's truly an amazing and profound sort of a thing that y'all know Morse code so well. And so a big congrats to all of y'all once again. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one here goes to none other than Evan. And Evan said, have y'all seen the new Air Force video about our guys shooting down drones over Israel?
I haven't personally seen it because that would usually be something archival, so I usually skip over that to try and keep abreast of what's happening right now. So unfortunately, I don't think I did see it. But Matthew, did you see it?
I heard about it. I didn't watch it though, because I was like, I mean, honestly, when I saw that, I was like, oh, it's gonna be a hype video or something. I don't want to waste my time with that. But let's see here. If it's an Air Force video though, we should be able to show it. So let me see if I can go grab it real quick and see if I can find that. Let's see here. U.S. Air Force video Israel. It should be a top option here because it should be recent. Let's see here. It's something here that's exactly not popping. I don't see it anywhere actually on Twitter. So, interesting. I was going to grab it to show it, but I don't really see it anywhere here. So, if you can tell me where that was posted, where you saw it, I can probably pull it up and show it since it is from the U.S. government. We can show that without a copyright issue, but I don't really see it right off the bat though. So, I'll have to wait and see if he forwards that to me.
That's interesting. But in the meantime, we'll be on to the next one.
And our next live chat question goes to none other than Mike, who said, why are so many Air Force K-35s heading out of the USA towards the Atlantic?
They just want to see the sea, they just want to see the Atlantic out there, Atlantic, really cool place. A lot of people go, sir, the Atlantic is a really cool boat, a really cool ocean. And I said, why bad sea when sea good? Sea state great, wonderful stuff. Go swimming in the Atlantic. Great place, lots of wonderful beaches. Jersey Shore, Atlantic City. I have friends in Atlantic City. They talk in weird ways. They talk about they don't want to hurt you, and then they do. I don't know why they do that. Really weird people. But beyond that, there's also this place called Egg Harbor, and there's no harbor there. There's absolutely none. People go, why is it called the harbor? And I really don't know why. I sat there and looked at it, and I was like, there is no harbor around here. There's just not one. And then they have Pleasantville. They sit there and call it Pleasant. I don't know why. Look at it. Does it look pleasant to you? It doesn't look pleasant to me. Let's take a look at it. What does it look like? They only have 2 pictures of it, one of an empty road and one of an orchid. That's not a great city. I wouldn't call that pleasant, really, honestly, to me. But beyond that, I hope that addresses that well, but in all seriousness, to actually seriously answer your question, the reason why they're heading out, it could be a regular rotation of tankers heading to Europe while some are coming back, or it could be a forward deployment for increased air operations by the U.S. Air Forces inside of Europe and the Middle East. So I hope that does address that the best I can, and we are on to the next one.
Also, by the way, I just saw the video on YouTube that the Air Force put out. I'll be honest, it's 34 minutes long, and also it appears to be mainly interviews from the people involved with it. So we'll have to skip on it for now. And if it was footage of the actual drones being shot down, I would say, oh, let's take a look at it. But it looks to be very lengthy and very wordy, so we'll have to save that one for later. But moving into our next one here, this one goes to Old Warrior, who said, any update on that Kilo class sub that was having the diesel issue out there near Spain?
It's apparently under tow now, but we haven't been able to hear any other updates beyond that. So I hope that does address that well, and we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to TTPZ, who said, what platform would Ukraine use to even launch the Tomahawk missiles?
Well, that's a great question, and I would have to say that you're fake news. I'm just kidding, by the way. That's a good question. You really don't have an easy way to launch a Tomahawk, but they can always come up with a way. The Ukrainians have this crazy thing called Slavic engineering magic, and they will come up with a way to be able to launch a Tomahawk. They will come up with a literal road-based trailer with some sort of a cradle on it to where they can launch that thing. I can promise you they will find a way, but at the moment, that's actually a great question. I would not know if they have any ability to launch that thing normally, but they might use something like a flamingo cradle to launch it, possibly. But with that, I hope that does address that the best I can, at least. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Scott Wright, who said, shouldn't the U.S. be quiet about it and just simply send the Tomahawks without making it a big public spectacle? And honestly, Scott, I think there's a diplomatic element to it, or not really diplomatic, but I think there is more of like a menacing aspect to it. They're sort of sending the message to the Russians publicly that we are sending the Tomahawks, or at least strongly considering it. I think in the hope that maybe Russia is going to sort of like get scared by that, or maybe back down. But I think that's actually going to have the opposite effect, which honestly, I don't really give a damn personally what the Russians think. think at this point. They're currently launching attacks on NATO, so I don't really care what they think. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to agree with Enforcer Man on that. Who gives a damn what the Russians are thinking? But it is supposed to kind of make it a little bit clear so that way there isn't any unnecessary escalations of what we're going to be sending. That's why we generally do that sort of thing usually. But with that, I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Elizabeth McClung, who said, when will the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant become dangerous due to the cooling issue?
Most likely if this does not change within the next 2 weeks, most likely. Not to go with the whole 2 weeks thing, but that actually might be the case. But I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And we have a question from Joe Emily, who said, didn't the European nations give permission for Ukraine to launch stuff like 100 miles into Russia?
Actually, some European countries gave permission for them to do whatever they wanted in Russia, but generally that still doesn't pertain to American weapons. American weapons, the Americans have the final say on. So if, say, Britain gives Ukraine a Tomahawk, Britain doesn't have the authority to say, okay, you can fire the Tomahawk wherever you want. The authority for where the Ukrainians fire that still goes to America because we're the supplier of Tomahawks worldwide. So if Britain wants to get more Tomahawks from us, they have to defer to our judgment on how the Ukrainians can use it. Otherwise, the British will never get another Tomahawk. And then the Ukrainians won't get one either as a result of that, too. So I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one here goes to none other than Dale Alaticus, who said, did Moldova just hold their elections, voting a certain party in? And is it very strong to the EU or to Ukraine?
I actually didn't pay attention too much to the Moldovan elections today or their outcome, and I don't really know if the votes have been tabulated well enough yet to say who won. But generally, some sort of a pro-EU government usually wins inside of Moldova these days. So I hope that does address that the best I can. And also, Matthew, someone said, are you guys ex-military or just armchair military? We're 100% armchair military. We never served a day in our life. But with that, we're on to the next one.
And this one goes to Robert Harrington. He said, history will say that we're probably already in World War III, and we've not acknowledged it yet. And what do you think? And honestly, I would say, in my personal opinion, I would say you're right, Robert. I think it will be remembered in history as probably the start of World War III, because if Russia keeps this up, I'm not really sure how Russia can really back down at this point, unless NATO decides to completely ignore these drone attacks in their countries, which I don't think they're going to be able to keep that up for very long, because Russia's going to escalate even further. So I think it could be that stage, honestly. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to generally say that, can you reread the question?
We're in World War III now, he said. Do you think history's going to remember it like that?
This is going to be the part of history where scholars argue when World War III started, a lot like with World War II. Because some people say that World War II started in 1936 with the Marco Polo Bridge incident near Manchukuo. Others say that it started in 1939 with the German invasion of Poland. So I would have to say that we're probably going to be in that period right now where historians of the future will argue, when did it really begin? Did it begin way back in, say, 2014, or did it begin in 2022 or 2025, or when did it begin? It'd generally be some sort of an argument like that, and even still, they wouldn't have a clear answer then. But still, I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and this one goes to Mike Garcia. He said, in light of the recent cell phone surveillance farm found in New York, should we be concerned about foreign spying on the Tuesday military meeting? And also, congrats on 500,000.
And thank you for the congrats on 500,000. And I would have to say, I don't really think that'll play in too much. There's most likely going to be a confiscation of personal cell phones before that meeting, kind of like a skiff of a sort, I would assume. So that probably wouldn't be too much of an issue or a risk. So I hope that does address it the best I can. And with that, we are on to the next one.
Also, by the way, in case people don't know, most people have probably heard about this and know about it, but there are secure ways to speak to commanders over teleconferencing when they're overseas. And most people say, well, everything's hackable. And that is true. Everything is hackable if you have, good enough hackers. But at the same time, though, we do have effective means right now, so that way these commanders don't have to physically come to Virginia to meet with everybody. So that's the big point of contention that nobody really understands right now. Maybe we don't have certain information that that the government has, but why are people being demanded that they come to Virginia in person when they could simply put them on a teleconference and speak to them all that way? Because they're pulling them away from their active duty posts, which right now the world's very hostile right now. So pulling active duty commanders away from their posts is not considered ideal. So unless it's something as significantly important, or unless maybe the U.S. military believes that China has the capability to hack our encryption, then I'm not sure why they would bring everybody here all at once like that.
I would have to say I would agree with you on that. That's an interesting thing to think about and consider and to think about and ponder on a little bit extra.
Also, isn't Quantico where the FBI building or headquarters is at?
Oh, let me
Or the
check.
training center. The training center, I think it is.
Quantico Base in Virginia. Honestly, Quantico is kind of, a little bit underdeveloped, really. It's quite small too.
It's a Marine base. It's a Marine base, but I think they have FBI training out here too. If I'm not mistaken.
Wait a minute. Oh shoot, they have Amtrak service. In Quantico. Look at that. They actually have a train station in Quantico. And what train runs through here? Damn, the Carolinian, the Northeast Regional, and the Fredericksburg line. That's actually a lot of service for Quantico, of all places. That's a little bit wild. But anyways, beyond that, this is apparently where the meeting will be held, somewhere on this base. I wouldn't know what building, and that, of course, would be an operational security sort of a thing. But still, this is generally...
Isn't the farm out here, too?
Huh?
Isn't the farm out here? Isn't it? I don't think it's in Quantico base, but the farm's out here somewhere.
I think it is, actually. I think you are correct on that.
Yeah, they have the little mock towns and stuff like that. The FBI has their different version of the farm. Also, by the way, the farm is what the CIA uses to train their spies as well. They train them at the farm. It's a very controlled area. But the FBI has a training academy. I believe it's in Quantico base, if I'm not mistaken. I don't know a whole bunch about the way the FBI does their stuff and everything, but it might be in the general vicinity of the farm, though. Oh, look, they have a whole little airstrip and everything.
Yeah, this is Marine Corps Air Station Quantico, MCAS Quantico. And this doesn't really have a lot of equipment here. I guess when the satellite picture was taken, they were off having fun, I guess, because there's only one C-17 here from the U.S. Air Force, and that was it. So a little bit interesting with that. So, and also apparently some rail fan pointed out that this is the Richmond, Frederickson, and Potomac subdivision, which is interesting to note. The rail fan strike in the middle of Quantico for some reason. Also, what the hell is this? This looks like a wasteland. This is apparently called Quantico Creek. I think this is worse than Camp Lejeune with the whole water thing here. But
if you get disciplined, go get in the creek. No. Anything but the creek. Anything.
Get in that tar water, damn it. You come out looking like you're covered in printer ink or something. That looks terrible. I bet you this stuff stinks if you're near that in real life. That looks bad. But anyways, beyond that, this is apparently where the meeting is going to be, from what we know. And I mean, it's not really the most secure place, but considering that it is, at least in a straight line, about 120 miles to the coast in Delaware. Look, Jack, we're at Bethany Beach, Dewey Beach, in the Redabaugh Bay, and Agala Landing, Indian River Bay, and then Nose Landing State Park. Considering it's that far from the shore, I mean, it may not be that big of a deal, but still a little bit interesting that they gather them all up in one spot.
That is interesting, yes.
Oh, look, Manassas. Wow, it's the Battle of Manassas. That's where this happened, actually.
Also, where's Fort Meade at? Can we see Fort Meade?
Fort Meade? Why would we want to look at Fort Meade? Here it is.
Oh.
Fort Meade.
Fort Meade. You have to love the place. You don't know why Fort Meade's important?
The NSA building is here.
You're looking at it right there. Look at that. Beautiful Fort Meade. You have to love Fort Meade. That's a beautiful place. They take this thing called a dragnet. They say, drag the net over the entire United States. They said, just drag it right over it. Pull in everything you can. We'll sort it out later, kind of like everything. We have concepts of a plan to sort through this information. But for right now, though, just collect it and play it safe. That's what they tell me.
Look. PT belts. They're all being saved from car collisions today, everyone. Clearly, a high-vis belt will save you. But beyond that, this is Fort Meade, which is close to Baltimore, which is a war zone, as we all know. Oh, man. That's why Fort McHenry is here, and that's also why the Star-Spangled Banner was written. Some people have been lied to about history. Some people have been told that the Star-Spangled Banner was written because Fort McHenry was trying to hold out against a British bombardment. The reality is that they were trying to survive a gang shooting in Baltimore, and the flag was still standing in the morning, which was a massive feat. I mean, you know, that sort of a resiliency has never been heard of in the world, or Baltimore for that matter. So that's where the Star-Spangled Banner came from. I'm just kidding, by the way. I got nothing against Baltimore. Baltimore is actually a cool city historically, but I've heard that it's fallen on hard times lately because most of their economic base has left. But they do have the Baltimore and Ohio Railroad Museum, which does have some incredibly fine examples of early American railroading present within its halls. The Baltimore and Ohio was a very influential railroad during its time, but it's gone these days, and it's now generally a part of the CSX. But anyways, with that, it is time for us to move on into all the other wonderful and brilliant questions that we have. A couple of more before we round out this thing for the night. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, so this one goes to Mad Machine, who said, when do you think the lack of fuel causing the loss of mobility and the empty food shelves will cause the people to rise up against Poopler?
I think it's probably going to take another year or a year and a half, probably. That will probably be also when the economy just completely fails and starts to collapse. So with that, I hope that does address it the best I can. And with that, we are on to the third to last question of the night.
And the next one goes to Robert Rhodes. Thank you so much, Robert, for that support and that very kind words there. We do appreciate that. Robert Rhodes, that's what they call him. Great guy. They said he's probably one of the best men we've seen in a long time. But thank you, that Robert. We love Robert. Robert said, is the Tomahawk, the Tomahawk, those beautiful missiles, they make them so good, they do those missiles right. The Tomahawk, is it powerful enough to take out the bridge? They said that Kerch Bridge, the one that sucker of a bridge, can it take it out?
Some people have told me, sir, the Kerch Bridge, it's a big problem. And I said, how do we fix it? And they said, well, sir, we've got this great little system. It's called the Tomahawk. And I said, like that one that John Wayne used? John Wayne, a real American, gone but not forgotten. He was a real American. Draft dodger 100%, but he did look good in the movies. He was a great guy, also part of the House Un-American Committee. Guy was a real bastard, honestly. I don't know if I like John Wayne, but beyond that, they did say that, well, as a matter of fact, sir, we have this Tomahawk, and it can hit the bridge. It can blow it sky high. And I said, why don't we give that to them? I said, turn on the lights and blow that thing to high heaven. And then they gave it to them, and they really did some work with it. They did some great work. Putin was crying. He was in his office crying like a bitch. He went, oh, boo, it's gone. It's blown up to pieces. I just don't have it anymore. And I said, let's make the Kerch Strait great again. Let's get ferries across the strait. Let's send them out. And then I realized that those are being used by the Russians to help out their little war. So then I said, let's get some harpoons, some AGM-84 harpoons, like those ones that they used on Moby Dick. A really weird name nowadays, saying Moby Dick, but that's what they called it back in the day. It was a big whale. It's a big whale. It has nothing to do with anything that people would think about these days. You know, a lot of people have been saying some rough shit, about that sort of a name, really crazy name. But beyond that, we could give them harpoons to blow up the ferries with. The ferries would be no more, and people would be going, oh, these ferries, they're gone. They're sinking to the bottom. And I would be saying, oh, this is a great thing, or a really incredible thing, wonderful thing. Have that thing sink to the bottom, send them to hell. Okay, well, beyond that, I would have to say generally that sending them a Tomahawk would blow up the Kerch Bridge. Hypothetically, realistically, it certainly would. And Extra Ice Police said fake news, and no, you are fake news. You're the fakest of fake. The polling and the ratings are showing that you're dropping down your miserable news channel. I'm just kidding, by the way, with you, Extra Ice Police. I know you're just playing along, but with that, I hope that does address that well, and we are on to the second to last question of the night.
Also, by the way, a big shout out to Backyard Brawl Brothers, by the way, for putting in a $2 super chat. We do appreciate it very much. Once again, good sir. He said, September 29th, 1908, the first train through the Grand Canyon.
Hey, and the first train through the Grand Canyon was one hell of an event. An incredible event. And let me go pull that up. First train through the Grand Canyon. The Grand Canyon Railway. Look at it. That's a recreation from 2011. But here was one of the inaugural runs in 1901. And then again, let's see, where the hell's the one from 1908? Let me go get that picture. Actually, it says September 17th of 1901. So I guess this is the picture of the inaugural run. And look, they were using a classic, is it a mogul? It's like a 460. But beyond that, really cool stuff. I gotta say that railroading and trains in general is incredibly interesting to me. I find this sort of stuff really neat because apparently this was actually run by the Atchison, Topeka, and Santa Fe, the ATSF. And I was actually looking, folks, at some of what is left of the Santa Fe. And nowadays, all that is left are these Dash 9 Santa Fe's, and let me see if I can show y'all some of these. They're getting really beat up and worn out looking nowadays, like this one. But this is all that's left these days of the old Atchison, Topeka, and Santa Fe, which was once a monster, like an absolute machine of the American Southwest. Nowadays, it's a part of the BNSF and lives on actually in the BNSF's name, because the BNSF, which is this, that stands for Burlington Northern Santa Fe, because the Burlington Northern Railroad and the Santa Fe merged together back in 1991, I think, and created what is now, well, I think it was actually it was 1991, or 1990, somewhere around there, but they actually created the BNSF as it exists today, which is actually owned by Berkshire Hathaway, which is operated by Warren Buffett. So a little bit of an interesting fact about that as well. But really cool stuff, and thank you for sharing that interesting factoid of railroading information with me. I like to hear about that stuff. And also, Scale Trains is coming out with a brand new Dash 9 and the War Bonnet livery, which is really cool, and they're also coming up with some that are weathered, like this, and I thought that was incredibly cool, because I like that weathered, worn out look. I think it looks really neat. It's just a shame, though, that red doesn't age well in the sun, and that's why a lot of railroads really kind of veered away from painting anything in red, because it ends up looking like that after a couple of decades, and it's really pink more than red. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address it the best I can. A big thanks to you once again for sharing that interesting piece of information with us today. And with that, we are on to the final question of the night. And so, who was the last person who threw in the lucky last question of the night?
And this one's actually a super chat from Ryan H. And thank you very much, Ryan, as well, for that $5 support. He said, why does the Kaliningrad Oblast still exist as part of Russia after the Soviet Union collapsed? And why didn't it become an independent country?
That is a great question. After the defeat of Nazi Germany in World War II, the Soviet Union actually took the northern part of East Prussia as a form of compensation or reparations from the defeated German state at the end of the war. After that, the Soviet Union then conducted a forced mass exodus, pretty much a cultural genocide, where all of the Germans that lived in East Prussia were forcefully relocated into East Germany, and then they repopulated the area with ethnic Russians. So pretty much, there's nothing left of either the Polish regions of East Prussia or the German parts of East Prussia culturally in Kaliningrad. It literally is a Russian exclave at this point, pretty much population-wise, culturally, ethnically, and everything in between. And that's why it never turned into an independent country after the war, is that it quite literally is just a little piece of Russia that's not attached to the rest of it anymore, at least as far as the people there living are concerned. So with that, I hope that does address that the best I can. And with that, folks, we have reached the end of tonight's stream. And I have to say, folks, what an absolutely incredible and amazing thing it is for all of y'all to continue to be here with us watching this news. We had a peak viewership tonight of 22,000 people, and 151,000 people have watched this stream since it started. We're honored, honestly, massively appreciative of all of y'all being here and watching tonight, and also massively appreciative of all of y'all raising $2,929 for Razum for Ukraine, which is an amazing nonprofit, and a big shout out to all of y'all who have supported it so far. And also, one other thing, a big shout out to everyone who's subscribed tonight, because we have now hit 509,000 subscribers handily.
Holy moly!
Whoa, Jack, we're hitting them. Beyond that, it's time
That's
for
a
us.
damn good thing that we hit that number right there. It's we hit it already, and we hit it yesterday. But thank you for hitting it today. We're gonna hit it tomorrow. We appreciate it.
And of course, folks, we will see you all tomorrow. Well, in a short word video if we make one. And if y'all don't see us in a short word video, which Enforcer Matt will be making if there's enough news, y'all will see us on Tuesday, either in my short word video or at 10 p.m. Eastern Time to cover the next 48 hours of news from around the world. Of course, I do want to remind all new viewers that we do not run streams on Mondays. We run streams at 10 p.m. Eastern Time every single day of the week except for Mondays. Mondays, we take the night off. And so with that, we will see you all at one of those specific times here within the near future. And so with that, good night, good luck, take care, stay safe. Slava Ukraini, Horom Slava, long live the Lead Spring Army, and long live the Republic.
And I just want to say a big shout out to everybody tonight that threw in such a generous donation of $2,934 of the $2,500 goal. That's something there that we should all be very proud of here in this country, and we appreciate every single person very much that threw that in. Don't forget, remember the Bears. But anyways, folks, seriously though, like all jokes aside, huge thanks to you all again for helping us to hit that goal and smash that goal tonight. We do appreciate it very, very much. And also, a huge shout out to all 151,000 people that were here by the end of the stream. And we will be seeing you all tomorrow on the short war video and also on Tuesday night at 10 p.m. Eastern for the next nightly War News stream. But with that, folks, thank you all for watching. And of course, Slava Ukraine, Herom Slava, get some rest, and good night.